Chapter 2750. Another Super King warrior had died in Yi Shiwen's hands without any warning. At this time, Yi Shiwen was like a rampaging Tyrannosaurus Rex. Anyone who touched him would die. There was no other outcome. This strike had caused everyone to tremble in fear, especially the Tian clan. To them, Yi Shiwen was just a fledgling. However, it was this fledgling from the younger generation who had killed them without any strength to fight back. Retreat! Such a feeling appeared in Emperor Tianqi's mind. He was terrified by Yi Shiwen previously, and this time, he thought that the few of them were enough to deal with Yi Shiwen. Who knew that in just a few moves, Yi Shiwen would kill all of them? How would he dare to stay? If he did, he would be beaten to death by Yi Shiwen. You want to leave? Yi Shiwen chased right away. He hollered and caused the sky to change. He was ridiculously strong. The moment Emperor Tianqi retreated, the terrified heaven race experts all collapsed and the entire defense line collapsed. Let's flee. We are no match for him. Old ancestor. Only then can we defeat him. Many people exclaimed and didn't dare to stay at all. Moreover, the 8th Army was much stronger than them. They didn't have the upper hand in terms of normal combat strength, and even lost to the Alliance Army in terms of peak combat strength. How could such a battle continue? In an instant, Yi Shiwen caught up to Emperor Tianqi. He charged in front of him and blocked him. Emperor Tianqi, I told you that sooner or later you would pay the price for your stupid actions. Yi Shiwen said coldly. Kill yourself, and you can keep your pride as a king. If not, you won't have such a good time if I kill you. At this moment, the Alliance Army was totally in awe of Yi Shiwen. With his strength alone, he suppressed the few kings and the entire heaven race defense line. How amazing was that? The other god kings were stunned. They didn't do anything because Yi Shiwen had totally suppressed the situation and there was no point for them to do anything. Initially, many people were dissatisfied with the fact that a junior like Yi Shiwen had become their leader. However, they couldn't say anything at this time. With such a powerful army commander overseeing things, what was there to be afraid of? How can this Yi Shiwen be so powerful? How long has he been cultivating? Yet, he has already become so powerful. It's simply unimaginable. If he is allowed to cultivate for thousands of years, he won't directly become an emperor, right? Many people felt a little dizzy. There was no lack of experts of the Hidden Valley among them. They had always heard about how powerful Yi Shiwen was, so they should have been completely accustomed to it. However, they had never expected that he would be strong to this extent. It was simply heaven-defying. Yi Shiwen, let me tell you the truth. All of you won't be able to escape today. If you waste time on me, you will regret it later. Emperor Tianqi said coldly and stared at Yi Shiwen. Oh, it seems like you still have a backup plan? Yi Shiwen said faintly. Weren't you so aggressive just now? Now you're begging for mercy, but it's useless. Once I kill an ID, all your plans will be in vain. But you're right, we can't waste any more time. I'll give you 3 seconds to consider whether you want to commit suicide or let me kill you. Fight it out with him. Even if we have to die, we have to drag him down with us. A heaven race expert hollered unwillingly. Right, fight it out with him. Old ancestor is going to show his prowess, and all of them will die. Another god king hollered. Yi Shiwen didn't give them any chance to live at all. They were a little mad. Since they were going to live, then why not fight to the death? 3, 2, 1. Yi Shiwen counted to 1 and said, Since all of you don't cherish the chance, then don't blame me. Attack, break through him. I don't believe that he can block so many of us alone. Emperor Tianqi hollered and attacked. A sword appeared in his hand. Although it couldn't be compared to the Tianqi Emperor's sword, it was still extraordinary. It slashed towards Yi Shiwen, and the sword light sliced through time and space. Instantly, it turned into a Milky Way that swept the sky. Quick, let's attack. We can't let them escape. This might be their last line of defense. Kill them, and we will enter to kill NID. At this moment, a god king in the Alliance Army said. At this moment, the experts all came back to their senses. Maybe the battle would end here. As long as they defeated these people, they wouldn't be far away from that huge achievement. Most importantly, they would be able to come into contact with the opportunity to become an emperor. They might have a chance to become an emperor themselves. Everyone's ambitions were ignited, and they all rushed forward, courageously advancing, and began to block the experts of the Tian clan. At this moment, the Heaven Race experts' eyes turned red. They all wanted to escape for their lives. One side wanted to escape, and one side wanted to obtain the Tao. Both sides had a reason to kill one another. All of a sudden, there were mountains of corpses and seas of blood. But overall, the Alliance army had the advantage. The war beasts were charging, and the war fortresses were sweeping. They were invincible. Do you think that numbers are enough? Yi Shiwen's body floated up, and the stone sword appeared in his hand. Stone energy spread out and filled the air. Pooh! 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 In an instant, all of the stone chi turned into sword chi and rained down. Each of the sword chi could pierce through an expert of the Tian clan, and with so many experts, it was impossible for them to block the rain of sword chi. Emperor Tianqi retreated and cleared out the sword energy, wiping out the sword rain that was falling down. Pung! A beam of sword light pierced through the sky and appeared on his chest. It instantly pierced through him and sent him flying backward. At this moment, he saw that Yi Shiwen was already in front of him. Golden blood flowed down the stone sword. He was the one who personally slashed out that sword. Such a large-scale attack couldn't pose much of a threat to Emperor Tianqi. At most, it would just be a nuisance, so he had to do it personally. It's time to put an end to this. Yi Shiwen's stone sword issued a buzzing sound once again. It was constantly clanging. Ancestor, are you going to sit here and watch me die as well? Emperor Tianqi hollered in rage. There was a giant hole in his chest, and large amounts of god blood flowed out. In that instant, he was heavily injured by Yi Shiwen's sword and nearly died. He had tossed aside everything and hollered in unwillingness. It doesn't matter who comes now. Yi Shiwen scoffed coldly. He stepped out and charged forward. However, at this moment, a blazing radiance descended from the sky. A gigantic furnace descended from the sky like a comet that was about to crash down. Honglong! This furnace fell from the sky, swept past the position where Yi Shiwen was just a moment ago, and directly exploded under Yi Shiwen's feet, smashing the ground and transforming it into chaos and darkness. It looked extremely terrifying from afar. This strike shocked everyone who was in the midst of an intense battle. The Alliance army didn't know what was going on, but the Heaven Race experts all became excited. Old Ancestor is attacking. We are saved. These damn fellows are going to die. Many of them were excited. Yi Shiwen's body appeared in front of Emperor Tianqi, and there were some charred marks around his body. That strike was quick and rushed and nearly hit him. Luckily, he reacted first, otherwise he would have been ripped apart on the spot. Although he dodged it, he was still grazed by a little. His mind was shaken and his body was injured. With Yi Shiwen's current physical body strength, it was unimaginable for him to be injured from just a little graze. This kind of power already towered above the 10 great divine kings. Even the 10 great divine kings, rank 1 immortal Copper King, also did not feel that he possessed such horrifying power. But it was obvious that he didn't have the ability to attack consecutively, or he was restricted by something. Otherwise, even if Yi Shiwen could dodge, the 8th Legion would collapse. There was actually such an expert hidden in the Heaven Race? No one can save you. Yi Shiwen attacked viciously. No matter who he was going to kill Emperor Tianqi to get rid of any future problems. You dare! Seeing that Yi Shiwen didn't stop, a shocked and furious voice spread out from the depths of the Heaven Race base. But Yi Shiwen didn't care at all. He smashed all of Emperor Tianqi's defenses and then pierced him with his sword. A dignified emperor had actually died here. Perhaps many years ago, even in his dreams, he would never have imagined that he would one day die in the hands of a brat that he had never taken seriously. In that battle, Yi Shiwen wasn't even qualified to fight against him. But now, Yi Shiwen was able to kill him. The affairs of the world were impermanent. This was probably the case. He swallowed Emperor Tianqi's essence blood with the demon-calling flag and plundered his wealth. Only then did Yi Shiwen heave a sigh of relief. From the start, The chase had finally come to an end. However, Yi Shiwen felt even more uneasy in his heart. The power of that strike just now had already completely surpassed that of the 10 great divine kings. It clearly surpassed the power of this level. Who was this? Why didn't the heaven race, who had such strength, use it before? How many secrets were they hiding? Chapter 2751. Now, it was time for both sides to compete. No matter who won or lost, it was inevitable that they would be hurt. 2 experts of the 10 Great God King level and 1 expert close to the 10 Great God King level all died in Yi Shiwen's hands. Their wealth added up was an astronomical figure, especially since Emperor Tianqi was the ruler of a country. Although he left in a hurry and couldn't bring too much wealth with him, even so, the 3 of them added up to 3 trillion divine source to Yi Shiwen. This didn't include the other treasures. As expected, destroying a family was the key to exploding overnight. This was the wealth that the 3 of them had accumulated for tens of thousands of years. Now, it all belonged to Yi Shiwen. But now that Yi Shiwen wanted to break through, the consumption was huge, and he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Most importantly, be it himself, the mysterious space, or the Mingxin ancient tree, they all needed a large amount of resources to run and grow. If it was normal wealth accumulation, it was far from enough for Yi Shiwen. However, the uneasiness in Yi Shiwen's heart became stronger and stronger. Even when Emperor Tianqi was defeated, he was still very confident that he wouldn't be able to escape. What kind of barrier did he have? Was it the Tian Race Alliance army that hadn't arrived yet? These thoughts lingered in Yi Shiwen's mind, but he didn't stop. Instead, he rushed towards the depths of the Tian clan's base at a faster speed. No matter what the other party's plan was, as long as he killed the NID, he wouldn't be able to overturn the situation. Yi Shiwen sped all the way in. He was extremely quick and kept tearing space. The entire defense line had collapsed and they couldn't form a decent defense anymore. Thus, his speed was really quick. In just a short while, he reached the core area of the Tian Race base. He instantly saw a shocking scene. There were incantations ringing in his ears. It was as if he was in a very ancient country. The incantations were really close to the Tao, like the Tao was rotating. Looking from afar, it was a giant blood ocean. The entire golden blood ocean was like boiling water, constantly boiling and giving off a fragrance. In the surroundings of this sea of blood, there were a total of 999 gods that formed an indescribable formation. They were constantly chanting divine texts, and every single one of them was extremely ancient. It was a miracle in and of itself that they had survived from an extremely distant era. At the center of the great formation, an elderly figure was bobbing up and down continuously. His entire body was emitting a golden magic power. The entire great formation was constantly circulating, drawing out a terrifying power from his body. Yi Shiwen recognized this power. It was the same power that had attacked him a moment ago. Yi Shiwen was very familiar with this aura. He would never mistake it for someone else. No wonder he gave up after just one attack. It turned out that he was trapped by this formation, so he couldn't continue to attack. The old man's body constantly emitted a terrifying aura, and the laws manifested around him, forming a terrifying divine kingdom and field. Strands of primal chaos lingered around his body, making him look like a tall mountain surrounded by clouds and mist. This was a powerful quasi-emperor. For Yi Shiwen, it was a rank that only existed in legends. In the current era, quasi-emperors were rare, and not much less than emperor kings. The reason why people only knew about the 10 great divine kings was that once they reached the quasi-emperor realm, those people would all hide and cultivate and look for opportunities. They were the group of people who were the closest to emperor kings. At the same time, they were the group of people who were most likely to cultivate and become emperor kings. As for the opportunistic places like the Kurfürst Road, it was just an exception. Therefore, such a group of people often wouldn't appear in front of ordinary people. Their entire purpose in this life was to find a chance of survival and let themselves step into that supreme realm. According to the tacit understanding between the various forces, the experts who had reached that realm couldn't intervene in ordinary matters. Otherwise, the world would have been in chaos a long time ago. That was an existence that was even more terrifying than the 10 great divine kings. However, Yi Shiwen also came to a sudden realization. It was already a matter of life and death. How could they still care so much? However, how could the allied forces of the various races be unprepared for this issue? What is the Heaven Clan doing? Yi Shiwen reacted at once. No matter what the Heaven Clan was planning to do, it was obvious that they were plotting something big. The only comforting thing was that although this old man exuded a chilling aura, it was not the kind of invincible aura that had achieved Tao. Yi Shiwen had once felt this aura from the body of the Demon Emperor. It was an aura that could change the color of heaven and earth just by standing there. Even the most powerful Demon King could only look up to it. He had never felt it before. But as his cultivation became more and more tyrannical, he could increasingly feel the horror of the Demon Emperor, which was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but feel a little pity in his heart. If the Avicii sword was in his hand, no matter what means the opponent had, he could directly slash down with the sword. No matter what conspiracy the opponent had, all of them would be annihilated. However, without the Avicii sword in his hand, even Yi Shiwen didn't dare to act rashly. Not to mention the others. Even the old quasi-emperor, who seemed to be unable to move, was not someone he could deal with. But why didn't I see the inverse emperor? He couldn't help but feel a little strange. Open. Yi Shiwen's eye of redemption suddenly opened, and he immediately saw through everything. The myriad world was in his eyes. His eyes looked through the boiling blood sea and found that under the blood sea, a figure was moving up and down, seemingly absorbing some power. It was the inverse emperor. What was more terrifying was that under the inverse emperor, a figure that was tens of thousands of miles long was lying quietly in this blood sea. Yi Shiwen's eyes just looked through, trying to see what it was. But in an instant, there was a crushing pressure, and Yi Shiwen's eye of redemption almost exploded. If Yi Shiwen didn't cut off his vision in time, he would almost be seriously injured. Emperor's corpse. It's actually the Emperor's corpse. Yi Shiwen suddenly jumped up. There was actually an Emperor's corpse hidden under this blood sea. Yi Shiwen suddenly recalled the legend about this battlefield. The Flame Lord had once mentioned that an emperor was buried in this battlefield. However, he did not take it seriously because there was such a rumor. However, it was only a rumor because no one had ever found the emperor's corpse in this battlefield. Unexpectedly, the Tian clan had found it. Yi Shiwen suddenly recalled the legend about this battlefield. The Flame Lord had once mentioned that an emperor's corpse was buried in this battlefield. The most important thing was that even if ordinary people found it, it was impossible to get close to the emperor's corpse. Even after a god died, the laws of heaven and earth would automatically protect it, forming a divine tomb, not to mention the death of an emperor. Even if he had already died, the corpse could not be tarnished. Ordinary people didn't even have the chance to get close to it. Is it because of the opportunity to achieve Tao? Yi Shiwen suddenly thought of a possibility in his mind. If even the inverse emperor could also get close to this emperor's corpse, then perhaps everything was very obvious. The Heaven Clan must be planning something extraordinary, but the allied forces were not prepared at all. Yi Shiwen felt even worse when he thought of the rumors of the crazy Taoist priest previously. Damn, what the hell is going on? At this time, the battle above the sky completely awakened Yi Shiwen. Clang, clang, clang. Above the sky, tens of thousands of swords were fighting. Each sword aura was thousands of miles long, like a mountain, pressing across the sky. It was the sword aura that erupted from the battle between the Tianqi Emperor's sword and the Avicii sword. The sky was torn apart, and the laws were manifested, as if two invincible emperors were fighting. After the revival of the Taoist tools, the power they had was really strong and terrifying. Both sides had fought from the depths of the stars to here. The Avicii sword crushed all the way, and the Tianqi Emperor's sword kept retreating, completely defeated. If the Tianqi Emperor's sword was at its peak, it might be able to compete with the Avicii sword. However, without the control of its master, the Tianqi Emperor's sword only had half of it left, and the remaining half had been swallowed by the Avicii sword. Although it fought with the Avicii sword in a moment of anger, it was actually still not its opponent. Under the stimulation of these two great Taoist tools, there seemed to be a surge of aura between the heaven and the earth, and there was even an aura from a distant place penetrating through the sky and descending. Yi Shiwen could feel that many Taoist tools in the heavens and the myriad worlds had been revived by this force, and had automatically awakened from the endless slumber. This feeling was very shocking, as if all the emperors who had appeared in the world had all gathered together in an instant. This was something that ordinary people couldn't feel. Yi Shiwen could only feel it by relying on the practice with the Avicii sword. Only Taoist tools of the same level could sense the Taoist tools. The revival of any Taoist tool was a major event in the myriad worlds. The Tianyuan mirror also had a faint reaction. Although the Tianyuan mirror was more seriously damaged and couldn't even maintain its rank as a Taoist tool, it was still different from ordinary tools. Yi Shiwen only had a feeling that things were really getting more and more serious, as if something was completely out of his control, but it had happened. Things suddenly changed. A scroll descended from the sky, manifesting a world. In an instant, it crushed the sky and came crashing down. Its target was none other than the Avicii sword. This scroll also had the terrifying might of a Tao treasure. Everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked. Suddenly, a scroll appeared. Yi Shiwen suddenly jumped up. The Avicii sword was very important to him. It could be said that among the many Taoist tools, its existence was second only to the Tianyuan mirror. Bang! The collision of the Taoist tools annihilated everything. Chapter 2752. The universe collapsed and the laws collapsed. Everything was completely reduced to ashes by the collision of the Tao artifacts. The peerless sharpness collided. In the sky, the three Tao tools collided and destroyed everything. A terrifying aura swept out. All the creatures were trembling. Under such a collision, they prostrated themselves. They didn't dare to resist at all. They couldn't resist at all. They could only worship continuously. This terrifying coercion crushed down. Yi Shiwen and the others were very close to it, so they could clearly feel it. Puff! 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 Blood spurted out. Many of the celestial deities in the Great Formation spat out blood. The entire Great Formation was shaking. This was the horror of the collision of the Tao tools. If the Avicii sword hadn't flown high up in the sky and the battle had only broken out in that place, then he would certainly have been able to escape. But then again, not even 1 out of 10 soldiers of the 8th Legion would have been able to escape. There was an inexplicable fear that no one could understand. Yi Shiwen's eyes stared at the sky. The Avicii sword was very important to him. He had no doubt that he could defeat the Tianqi Emperor's sword. But if there was another Tao tool, then the situation would be completely different. The blazing light hadn't dispersed yet. A more intense collision had begun. The Tianqi Emperor's sword seemed to have gone crazy. The sword energy kept sweeping out. It was like a long dragon piercing through the sky and into the cold universe. But it was still suppressed. The blood sea on the Avicii sword became more and more intense. It was like a real emperor had awakened. It was crazily suppressing the Tianqi Emperor's sword. Every sword energy turned into a huge hell of Avicii. It made the heavens fall into endless terror. They didn't know what the collision was like just now. On the other side of the celestial base, a scroll quickly rolled out and a group of lights swept out. It joined in the siege of the Avicii sword. The two Tao tools joined forces, and the Avicii sword immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. Yi Shiwen was very anxious. But a battle of this level wasn't something he could intervene in. It was almost a collision of worlds. Their Tao was enough to evolve a world. Boom! 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 The sounds were like the tolling of a bell. Shocking collisions caused primal chaos energy to surge. One world after another collapsed in front of everyone's eyes. What kind of power is this? Is this the true power of an emperor king? It's too scary. Fortunately, I didn't live in that era. It's really annoying to have someone above me controlling me. Some of the deities were scared silly. They had only heard of Tao artifacts clashing against each other in legends. However, when they thought about it, they found it to be normal. This was a battle that would wipe out entire races. Neither side dared to hold back. The image of a young man appeared on the scroll. He held the Tao diagram in his hand, suppressing everything beneath the heavens. Beams of light flickered out, piercing into the cosmos and piercing through the heavens, constantly suppressing the Avicii sword from all directions. Sort of Avicii, you are too arrogant. Do you think I don't know what you are thinking? Since I dared to come out and fight, do you think I wouldn't be prepared at all? I'll send you to your death now. The enlightening Emperor's sword let out a long roar. It held the long sword in its hand and slashed towards the Avicii sword. It had a terrifying aura, as if it wanted to destroy the world. Oof, it's just a cripple. So, what if there's another one? All of you shall die. The Avicii sword's voice was resounding. The spiritual power in its body was constantly boiling. Its blood was surging, and there was the sound of rushing thunder. All kinds of amazing techniques were displayed. Although they were only tool spirits, to a certain extent, they could also replicate some of the techniques of the supreme experts of the past. It was very amazing. Suddenly, another terrifying aura recovered from another direction. It seemed as if it had been awakened and was about to rush over. It was also the aura of the celestial race. This time, Yishuin was finally anxious. He didn't talk to the Allied forces. Therefore, the Allied forces weren't very clear about the relationship between him and the Avicii sword. Therefore, even if they had brought the Tao artifacts, they probably wouldn't revive the Tao artifacts to help the Avicii sword. This was the biggest problem. Although the Tao artifacts were the end of all the artifacts and were supreme, it didn't mean that it couldn't be damaged. Half of the enlightening Emperor's sword's body was swallowed by the Avicii sword. The Tianyuan mirror had fallen to the extreme. It was even subdued by Yi Shiwen, who was nothing in the past. Although there was the help of the mysterious space, it was enough to see how much the Tianyuan mirror had fallen at that time. If the Avicii sword was damaged, it would be its biggest loss. A supreme Tao artifact was enough to support a huge force. Even the inheritance of the Emperor wouldn't dare to underestimate it. Yi Shiwen was anxious, but there was nothing he could do. He could only watch helplessly. He was extremely depressed. That's not the Avicii sword. How can it be like this? At this time, on the other side of the battlefield, the Golden Dragon King swept all the way. He killed a few divine kings of the celestial race. He couldn't find any opponents at all. He looked up and saw that in the sky, the Avicii sword had erupted with a terrifying power, crushing all directions. He already knew that the Avicii sword was the treasured sword in Yi Shiwen's hand. He just didn't expect that it had erupted into a collision of the Tao artifacts. Could it be that the kid has already rushed into the core area and forced the Tao artifacts of the celestial race out? Such a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. He knew that it was impossible for the celestial race to be unprepared for this extermination battle. However, in his opinion, the battle had only just begun. The most intense battle had not yet begun, but it had already involved a battle of the Tao artifacts. He felt that he couldn't predict what would happen next. There was a faint sense of unease in his heart. However, there was no other way. He had already killed his way here. There was no way to retreat. That was then Yi Shiwen's. King Lai raised his head and saw the shocking battle of the Tao artifacts. This kid is so fast. He has actually killed his way into the core area. It seems that I have to speed up too. I can't be too slow. After slapping a powerful celestial race deity to death, he directly entered the battlefield. At this time, the battle of the Tao artifacts had attracted the attention of all the super experts on the battlefield. The collision of that level was like the resurrection of the Supremes. It was really too frightening. Avicii sword, today is the day you die. Not only will I take back half of my body, but I will also swallow you whole. The Tianqi Emperor's sword roared. Although it was only a weapon spirit, its status in the myriad heavens and realms was more noble than any quasi-emperor. Its cultivation was also extremely high. It had been cultivating beside the Supremes all year round, which in itself was a rare opportunity. However, at this time, because of the matter of the Avicii sword, it had lost its calm. I'll give you one more chance. If you're willing to surrender now, I can still accept you as a follower. Otherwise, you'll have to die today. The sword of Avicii did the opposite and said indifferently. The super experts who were still watching the battle here were in an uproar. The Avicii sword was besieged by 2 Tao artifacts, but it still dared to be so arrogant. It was simply crazy. Don't act like a winner. Do you think I don't know your background? Without the help of your master, do you think you can still be compared to the past? You are no longer the same as before. The Tianqi Emperor's sword sneered. It could clearly see that although the weapon spirits of the supreme Tao artifacts could rely on the connection with the Tao artifacts to forcibly resurrect the Tao artifacts, the power of the Tao artifacts that they could control and the power of the Tao artifacts in the hands of the supreme emperors were simply incomparable. It was almost a world of difference. Back then, the reason why the Tianqi Emperor's sword was defeated and even half of its body was swallowed was because Helm Master Avicii was present at that time. That extremely terrifying man almost subdued it with one move. In the situation where there was no master present, even if it was facing an unarmed supreme martial artist, it would still be at a complete disadvantage. Even if I am no longer the same as before, I am still stronger than you are now. Since you don't want this opportunity, then don't blame me. The weapon spirit of the Avicii sword sneered. Avicii sword, you are too arrogant. When I achieved the Tao, I don't even know where you were. You want to swallow the Tianqi Emperor's sword in front of me? You must be crazy. The young man on the scroll had a ferocious expression as he roared. This was also a Tao artifact that had achieved the Tao very early in the Tian clan. Its history was even longer than that of the ancestral dragon. Among the existing Tao artifacts, there were not many that were older than it. After the death of its master, it relied on a secret method to sleep until now. This was because the activities of these supreme Tao artifacts consumed endless energy every minute and every second. If it did not sleep, it was afraid that its reserves would be consumed very quickly. Every time it was resurrected, it would consume energy. Therefore, it would not be awakened unless it was an extraordinary moment. But this time, it was awakened by the younger generation of the Tian clan, which opened up a bloody path for the Tian clan. So, what if you have lived for a long time? The Avicii sword sneered. There is an order to achieving the Tao. Do you think that seniority depends on the length of time? Ha, you guys are too funny. High up in the sky, the 3 people were still fighting. But listening to their words, it seemed that they were confronting each other. In fact, every time a fatal attack erupted, this was not just a conversation, but also a confrontation of the great Tao. They were testing each other and killing each other. In the distance, the aura of another supreme Tao artifact gradually became stronger. Obviously, it had almost recovered. At that time, it would not be 1 against 2, but 1 against 3. At that level of existence, who would lose to who? Any one of them was an invincible existence. It was already very difficult for the Avicii sword to fight 1 against 2, and this was because the Tianqi Emperor's sword itself was half broken. If it was in its complete form, it would probably be unable to resist now. Chapter 2753. In a clash of this level, the slightest flaw could be a fatal threat. Although it wasn't enough to completely replicate the techniques of a supreme being, even a tiny bit of it was shocking enough. Thus, it was even more frightening. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Just as the other Tao artifact was about to completely awaken, the Avicii sword attacked. Roars! The Avicii sword roared, and the magic power around it began to boil. Sword energy overflowed in all directions, and the Tao diagram was shaken away. Then, an invisible energy spread out. The Apocalypse Emperor's sword, which was initially aggressive, was stunned. It was as though it had been frozen by a 10,000-year-old ice. Then, its expression changed. The Tianqi Emperor's sword's face suddenly showed a look of fear. That's right. You're right. Did you think that after devouring half of your body, I would simply refine it? The Avicii sword's face showed some savagery. The universe around it turned into a boundless sea of blood. The Tianqi Emperor's sword fell into the sea of blood without any resistance. It couldn't resist at all. You were preparing for this moment before. The Tianqi Emperor's sword kept struggling. It spat out sword chi. Each one was like a dragon that pierced through everything and entered the universe. But now, they were all devoured by the endless sea of blood and couldn't break free. That's right. Otherwise, who would be willing to talk so much with you? The Avicii sword sneered. The Tianqi Emperor's sword thought that it couldn't see that there was something strange here and that there were others waiting for it to ambush. However, it was just using the other's thoughts. It was just using each other. Both of them were confident of victory. However, the Tianqi Emperor's sword never thought that the Avicii sword would use the half of its body that it had devoured to affect it and control it. Although that half had been split off, it had never stopped thinking of getting it back after so many years. Thus, it didn't completely remove it. Now, this was all karma. It had to pay a sufficient price for this karma. The figure formed by the Tianqi Emperor's sword slowly sank and was devoured by the sea of blood bit by bit. You're courting death. Stop. The young man on the scroll flew into a rage. The Avicii sword didn't escape from under his nose, and it even dared to act violently in front of him. It didn't put him in his eyes at all. This was simply a slap to the face. That Tao diagram came crashing down. It was like a giant world was crashing down with the force of tens of thousands of caddies. Get lost! The Avicii sword roared and slashed out, directly blocking the world that was pressing down on him. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to devour the remaining half of the Tianqi Emperor's sword, he could even launch a counterattack. After devouring the other half of the Tianqi Emperor's sword, he was already above ordinary Tao treasures. The figure formed by the Avicii sword was burning fiercely. It had reached the most crucial moment. At this moment, he couldn't care less. Whether he could devour the Tianqi Emperor's sword depended on this. As long as he could succeed, everything would be worth it. Stop him. We can't let him devour the Apocalypse Emperor's sword. At this moment, the old quasi-emperor of the Tian clan who was floating above the sea of blood suddenly opened his eyes and shouted. But it was too late. The other Tao treasure was still in the recovery stage, so they couldn't attack immediately. Otherwise, the recovery effect would be greatly reduced. The experts of the celestial race were also very anxious, but there was nothing they could do. At this time, they were all in the formation and couldn't attack at all. Attack ahead of time. The loss of a Tao treasure is too great. The old quasi-emperor roared and gave an order. It was different from a top-grade divine tool. Since ancient times, there were only a few supreme emperor lords. Even if the celestial race claimed to be able to see all the other races in the universe, the number of emperor lords was still limited. This didn't include the Tao treasures that disappeared after the emperor fell, or the Tao treasures that disappeared with the emperor lord. In fact, there weren't many that they could control. The loss of a Tao treasure was really unbearable. Boom! A boundless aura shot up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, a boundless ancient aura was emitted from the blood sea. The Emperor Lord has recovered. Yi Shiwen was shocked, and the hair on his body stood up. Because he had seen it with the eye of redemption just now, he recognized this aura immediately. Who else could it be if it wasn't the Emperor Lord who had died many years ago? He thought of a terrifying possibility. If this was true, then everything was really serious. An invincible emperor had recovered. No matter what method the celestial race used to recover, even if it couldn't be recovered permanently, it would only be a short period of time. For the allied forces of the various races, it would be a nightmare. At this time, the vanguard troops of the 8th Legion had already arrived. They were led by a few god masters and a few god kings. They didn't even have time to smile when they saw Yi Shiwen. They immediately sensed the terrifying aura of an Emperor Lord. A wave of fear rose from the bottom of their hearts. This made these famous existences in the outside world who could summon the wind and summon the rain feel an urge to kneel down. They also had the same feeling in their hearts. This wasn't the aura of the Tao treasure when it was recovering. It was an existence more terrifying than the Tao treasure. Could it be that the Emperor Lord had really recovered? Or was there actually a powerful emperor hidden in the celestial race? Many people's hearts suddenly beat wildly, and they looked at Yi Shiwen. Now, Yi Shiwen had become the backbone of everyone. Not only did they covet Yi Shiwen's powerful combat power in the beginning, but more importantly, Yi Shiwen turned back and saved several dragon kings of the Dragon Clan during the battle. Many people were not unaware of the grievances between Yi Shiwen and the Dragon Clan. However, because of this, Yi Shiwen had become more trustworthy in the eyes of everyone. As long as they were under his command, they didn't have to worry about Yi Shiwen suddenly attacking them, even if they had done something dirty previously. Who wouldn't want to follow such a boss? Under normal circumstances, it was absolutely impossible for them to surrender to one person. They were all famous existences. However, the situation was completely different at this time. In such a chaotic battle, any previous prestige was useless. If they wanted to save their lives, they must have a powerful leader. The 8th Legion advanced all the way, but they didn't suffer many losses. The reason was that Yi Shiwen was opening the way in front. He wasn't like many Legion lords who just sat and watched the battle. He himself rushed to the front line, so when they rushed over, the opponent's defense line had already collapsed. They only needed to kill the remaining enemies effortlessly. Thus, unknowingly, they had already pledged their allegiance to him. There was no need for schemes or schemes. Strength was the guarantee of everything. Retreat! Hurry up and retreat! Yi Shiwen suddenly yelled. His eye of redemption exploded on the spot, injuring a part of his spirit. He saw that the Emperor's corpse actually began to move slowly, as if it was driven by some force and turned into a corpse. Yi Shiwen's entire person was suffocating, and his face turned green. He actually encountered such a situation. The Emperor's corpse came back to life. How terrifying was that? Even with the foundation of the heavens and realms, it would be turned upside down. It wasn't that such a situation hadn't happened since ancient times. It had only happened once, but it had left a deep impression on the people of the world. In the end, an emperor who had never appeared in the world before finally suppressed the corpse transformation Emperor's corpse. That battle was earth-shattering, and all clans suffered heavy losses. Now that it was mentioned, it made people's complexion change. Corpse calamity, it's a corpse calamity. Motherf asterisk Kerr, the Emperor's corpse came back to life. Yi Shiwen yelled, and he began to retreat. Originally, everyone was very puzzled. What's wrong with Yi Shiwen? He actually asked them to retreat. They were obviously on the verge of success, but now they suddenly reacted. Damn, it's actually an Emperor's corpse. Everyone suddenly got goosebumps all over their body. Although they had never seen an Emperor's corpse, it didn't mean that they didn't know how terrifying an Emperor's corpse was. That was a resurrected Emperor. Although it might not have all the power when it was alive, even if it was only a little bit, it was enough to make them suffer. Almost instantly, everyone began to flee backward. Those who came later didn't realize what was going on, but soon everyone heard about the Emperor's corpse, and they suddenly panicked. Even the most valiant people were suddenly stunned when they heard about the Emperor's corpse. There was actually an Emperor's corpse here. If it was just an Emperor's corpse, then it might be a huge divine treasure. They were going to make a fortune. Even a hair of an Emperor's corpse was a precious treasure that could be refined into a powerful martial instrument. But if the Emperor's corpse came back to life, then it was not a fortuitous encounter, but a huge disaster. Everyone broke into a run. Their speed was much faster than when they were beating the drowning dogs just now. Just now, they were harvesting the lives of others and competing to snatch the fortuitous encounter. But now, they were competing to escape for their lives. No one doubted Yi Shiwen's words, because they also felt the increasingly powerful aura. If it wasn't an emperor, then what else could it be? In a few breaths, everyone actually ran away, and only Yi Shiwen was left. He was still nervously looking at the Avicii sword in the sky. He was still worried about the situation of the Avicii sword. It was really too important to him. The blood sea, refined by the Avicii sword, was getting bigger and bigger. The angry roar of the Tianqi Emperor's sword could be heard all over the sky. The Dao diagram kept suppressing down, trying to save the Tianqi Emperor's sword, but it was blocked by the Avicii sword. This time, the Avicii sword was determined to completely devour the Tianqi Emperor's sword before the arrival of the Tian clan. Chapter 2754. This was a desperate bet. If it could devour the Tianqi Emperor's sword, the Avicii sword would naturally be able to reach a higher level and become stronger. However, if it was not controlled well, not only would the devouring fail, but it would also be besieged. If the awakening of the third Tao tool made Yi Shiwen anxious, then now that the Emperor's corpse had turned into a corpse, it made him feel like his eyebrows were on fire. Although the Tao tool was powerful, it was still not enough to compete with the Supreme Emperor. Every second felt like a year to Yi Shiwen. He saw the Avicii sword gradually engulfing the Tianqi Emperor's sword with the sea of blood. The young man on the picture scroll had already gone crazy. He had an incomparably ferocious look on his face. He wanted to blast the Avicii sword away. Do it! That human over there is his current master. Kill him! Kill him! The Tianqi Emperor's sword suddenly roared. It saw Yi Shiwen below and did not leave. The young man on the scroll reacted almost instantly, and then he pounced towards Yi Shiwen, and the mighty power of Tao swept over. Damn! Yi Shiwen saw the young man rushing down, and the terrifying power made the sky collapse. Yi Shiwen also instantly felt that terrifying power. Boom! An absolute attack exploded under Yi Shiwen's feet, and a big hole was blasted in the ground. The radius of thousands of miles suddenly collapsed, and it even affected the great formation that the Tian clan had set up. He did not even want to capture Yi Shiwen alive, but wanted to kill Yi Shiwen in one go. Yi Shiwen's mind was connected with the Avicii sword. Although he was far from subduing the Avicii sword, if he was killed, it was indeed enough to damage the Avicii sword. He was also a Tao tool, so he understood these things very well. F***CK. Yi Shiwen cursed. At this moment, he had already teleported thousands of miles away, and the space wings behind him were constantly flapping. Just now, he was almost killed by the Tao tool. Just the aftermath of the sweep had already made the blood in Yi Shiwen's chest churn, and he felt like he was about to vomit blood. Die! The face of the young man on the scroll was ferocious as he slapped out with his palm. It was like a pair of wings that covered the sky. In the blink of an eye, the entire world was imprisoned, and all space and laws were sealed. Bastard! The Avicii sword was enraged. It was at a crucial moment, and it didn't know whether to save him or not. However, at this moment, a blazing ray of light erupted from Yi Shiwen's body and wrapped him up. When this strike landed, it actually bounced back and pierced through his palm. What's going on? The Avicii sword looked over, puzzled. His gaze penetrated through the dust and saw a burst of divine radiance flickering on Yi Shiwen's body. He didn't know when he had put on a robe that was exuding a 7-colored streamer of light and had resisted this blow. That's the time magic robe. Just who in the world is this kid? He actually has such luck. The Avicii sword immediately recognized the magic robe on Yi Shiwen's body. It was the legendary time magic robe that had once shaken the world. It had once seen it from afar. At that time, the Time Lord was invincible, and it was under such circumstances that the time magic robe became known to the world. At this moment, the Avicii sword couldn't help but evaluate Yi Shiwen a little higher in his heart. Just the Tianyuan mirror, which was an incomplete supreme Taoist tool, was fine. Later on, he obtained the complete Avicii sword and this time magic robe. Yi Shiwen's foundation had unknowingly deepened to a terrifying extent. It was just that Yi Shiwen was different from ordinary people who obtained inheritances normally. He didn't have various methods to refine it. He could only use force to break it and refine it forcibly. It seemed to be much more difficult than those who had inheritances. But even so, his luck was completely against the natural order. Originally, the Avicii sword thought that Yi Shiwen was a burden. Now it seemed that this was not the case at all. With the time magic robe, and his martial power had already reached the peak of Divine King, he could also be of help. Now, the overall situation was very unfavorable for them. The revival of any Taoist tool would be an unparalleled enemy. Unless an Emperor King revived, who would dare to say that they could win for sure? With Yi Shiwen's help, it was undoubtedly much better. On Yi Shiwen's body, the time magic robe was exuding a kind of amazing light. It directly broke the attack of that picture scroll. Yi Shiwen sighed slightly. He had suppressed the time magic robe for many days. Now he had finally managed to refine it a little. The tool spirit in the time magic robe seemed to have been erased, so it couldn't revive on its own. But at the same time, it was precisely because of this that Yi Shiwen had the possibility of becoming its master. Otherwise, he had the tool spirit in it. As long as he could protect himself, Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to do anything to him. With Yi Shiwen's current strength, it was impossible to destroy a supreme Taoist tool. Yi Shiwen only felt that the spiritual power in his whole body was burning and boiling. He was unprecedentedly powerful. The time magic robe didn't just provide a strong defense. It could also increase the strength of its master. Coupled with the mysteriousness of the time magic robe itself, Yi Shiwen could easily break the attack of that picture scroll. Another Taoist tool, the time magic robe. Haha, I didn't expect to see the time magic robe again after so many years. But it's a pity that it doesn't have a tool spirit anymore. Now, it's being controlled by a mere divine king. The young man on the picture scroll sneered and said, "Myriad World's picture, you're just a loser. What else do you have to say?" Yi Shiwen sneered. He exposed the identity of the young man on the picture scroll. He was another emperor king of the Tian clan, Myriad World's mad monarch's life treasure. During the Second War of Resistance against the Heavens, Myriad World's mad monarch had fought with the Time King. In the end, he was defeated by him. If the Time King hadn't been besieged by several people, he wouldn't have fallen. Yi Shiwen couldn't guess the origin of this picture scroll Taoist tool before. But now, he could easily recognize the identity of this person. A mere junior dares to clamor in front of me. Myriad World's picture sneered and said, "It just so happens that the time magic robe has no master now. It's time for me to devour it." "Stop talking nonsense. Take my attack," Yi Shiwen shouted. The spiritual power on his body burned to the extreme. He blasted out a punch. The stars in the sky were pierced through. A terrifying fist energy that was thousands of miles long condensed like a pillar and blasted through everything. It blasted towards Myriad World's picture. Yi Shiwen couldn't achieve this with his own spiritual power. But with the enhancement of the time magic robe, it was completely different. The power of this attack was so powerful that the sky was trembling. "TSK, is this all you've got?" Myriad World's picture roared. Boundless power splashed out and turned into a world. It took the attack head-on. Bang! In just a short moment, this world was pierced through by Yi Shiwen's fist energy. He blasted into Myriad World's picture. Damn it, the power of time is troublesome. Myriad World's picture blasted out a series of attacks again and again. Only then did it stop Yi Shiwen's attack. Again! Yi Shiwen roared and rushed out again. He wanted to delay Myriad World's picture. Once the Avicii sword devoured the Tianqi Emperor's sword, everything would be fine. Moreover, in his current state, he really couldn't delay any longer, because every minute and every second was burning up a huge amount of resources. Along the way, Yi Shiwen had plundered a lot of wealth, but at this time it was being consumed crazily. He originally thought that he could use it to break through to the late stage of the king-ranked realm, but now it seemed that he couldn't. The time magic robe didn't have a weapon spirit. It couldn't automatically awaken. In addition, it had been suppressed by the Purple Thorns King's coffin for so many years. It had already used up most of its energy. At this time, it was forcibly awakened by Yi Shiwen. Naturally, it was Yi Shiwen's own energy that was being consumed. Although he had a lot of wealth now, he couldn't afford the crazy consumption of a Dao artifact. Therefore, he could only finish the battle quickly. The faster he finished, the more advantageous it would be for him. Moreover, if he continued to delay, the third Dao artifact would completely awaken, and the Emperor's corpse would completely come back to life. At that time, he was afraid that he would be in big trouble. Moreover, most importantly, he had to buy time for the 8th Legion to retreat. This time, he completely understood that the allied forces of the various races had fallen into the trap of the heavenly race. This was simply a huge trap, and the allied forces of the various races had actually dived headfirst into it. If it was just a normal confrontation of strength, the gap between the remnants of the heavenly race and the allied forces of the various races would be huge. However, if the Emperor's corpse came back to life, then the situation would immediately be different, and the situation would immediately be reversed. Right now, he could only delay for as long as he could. Even if you wear the time magic robe, an ant will ultimately be an ant. You want to participate in such a battle? You're really courting death. The myriad worlds picture revealed a somewhat sinister smile. At the same time, it was extremely angry that Yi Shiwen had actually delayed its time. You're just a master without a wastrel, and yet you dare to be so arrogant. Yi Shiwen sneered and responded with powerful combat strength. The space wings behind him flapped wildly and constantly flashed. Heaven and earth welcomed the crazy tremors. Swish! His whole body seemed to have turned into a ball of light, transcending time and space, and rushed in front of the myriad worlds picture, piercing through everything with one blow. The myriad worlds picture originally revealed a bit of a sneer. This blow was already powerful and difficult to resist in the eyes of ordinary people, but it was nothing to him. Which of his former opponents was not more tyrannical than the current Yi Shiwen? Bang! As soon as this thought flashed through the myriad worlds picture's mind, he was blasted away by Yi Shiwen's punch. His entire spirit body exploded on the spot, shattering the sky. Everything was completely destroyed under this punch, and the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation suppressed everything. Ah! Damn it, damn it! The myriad worlds picture roared again and again, and reassembled its spirit body in the distance. The body of the myriad worlds picture was difficult to destroy, but this did not mean that its spirit body was equally indestructible. Chapter 2755. This attack was so fast that the myriad worlds diagram, which originally thought that it could easily block Yi Shiwen's attack, suffered a big loss. That move of Yi Shiwen's had reached the point of insanity. Law of time! Damn the law of time! The myriad worlds diagram roared. This was the law of time attached to the robe of time. This was the real reason why the Time Lord was so difficult to deal with in the past. The Time Lord, who was protected by the law of time, dared to fight several Emperor Lords. Although Yi Shiwen did not have a deep understanding of the law of time, the robe of time could automatically cooperate with Yi Shiwen's attack. This was the power of a Dao tool. He was furious. He was too careless. He thought that he could defeat Yi Shiwen and kill him like before. But Professor Yi suffered a big loss. He forgot that Yi Shiwen was wearing the robe of time of the Time Lord, who was once famous in the world. It would be useless even if he were to wear the time robe if he were to face a real emperor. He would still die. However, he wasn't an emperor. And the myriad worlds diagram wasn't an emperor either. It was merely the tool spirit of a Dao tool. That's all. Again, Yi Shiwen took a deep breath and absorbed all the nearby spiritual energy into his stomach to replenish his spiritual power. Then, he blasted out another punch. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist clashed and turned into a terrifying 6 paths wheel, suppressing all directions. The myriad worlds diagram also blasted out a powerful attack and collided with Yi Shiwen. A blazing light burst out, as if the end of the world was coming. Watch me suppress you. I want you to know that even if you wear the robe of time, you are still an ant. The myriad worlds diagram roared. The power of both sides shook the world. The void instantly exploded. Light and shadow were boiling in an instant. It was like the end of the world. The movement of this battlefield also alarmed everyone. On the 2 battlefields, the aura of the Emperor Lord level was surging. And Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. He approached the myriad worlds diagram and punched out a group of afterimages. The shockwaves and fist energy were boundless, causing the star field to collapse. Although countless wealth was being consumed crazily, his heart was incomparably carefree. This was a realm that he had longed for, but could not reach before. This kind of power made him feel unprecedentedly carefree. Being in such a state, every minute and every second was a great enlightenment for him, a great benefit to him. The 2 of them had already charged into the depths of the star region. Both of them possessed unimaginable power that surpassed peak divine kings. Even quasi-emperors would pale in comparison to them. This was a terrifying power that could suppress all realms in the absence of a sovereign emperor. With the protection of the chrono-magic robe, Yi Shiwen could attack with all his might. He didn't have to worry about anything else. He could attack with all his might. His punches were imbued with the time precepts, which greatly increased the power of his punches. He could even threaten the myriad worlds diagram. Bang! 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 The fierce battle was still ongoing. Clang! A spear light traversed the vast sky. The spear pierced through the stars, shattered the sky, and fell on Yi Shiwen, who was in the midst of a fierce battle. Bang! Yi Shiwen's body flew out. His face turned green and white, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Another Dao tool was used. The Dao tool that had just been awakened had finally been awakened. The sky-splitting spear was the personal weapon of another sovereign emperor of the sky-splitting Great Emperor. The sky-splitting Great Emperor did not die, but was sealed in the boundless turbulence. He had lost contact with the myriad worlds diagram, leaving only the sky-splitting spear and some of his inheritance. When it came to comparing Dao tools, the sky-splitting Great Emperor was far from being comparable to the allied forces of the myriad worlds diagram. Although there were many sovereign emperors in the sky-splitting Great Emperor, they were all sealed in the endless void. The remaining Dao tools were basically left behind by the fallen emperors. It was rare to see a Dao tool like the sky-splitting spear that was lost in the myriad heavens and realms. However, it was as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Amidst the endless turbulence, no one knew where exactly it was. That was the place where many sovereign emperors had worked together to banish it. They couldn't even find the specific coordinates, let alone escape back. In fact, it was no different from dying. Some people said that behind the endless void, there was a huge world, and the exiled experts of the Tian clan were all there. Some people said that it was just a quiet world without any doubt. Time was eternal, and some people said that it was an extremely bad place. In short, there were many different opinions, and there were all kinds of opinions. Boy, I don't know where you got the time robe, but you're still far from being able to fight against us with just the time robe. The silhouette of the sky-splitting spear appeared. It was blood-red in color, and there were cracks on its surface. It was a special law, the sky-splitting law. It was a supreme secret technique created by the sky-splitting great sovereign himself. When cultivated to a high level, even the will of the heavens would be split apart by him. That was why it was called the sky-splitting spear. Yi Shiwen was speechless. This was also a fact. Even if the myriad worlds diagram's spiritual body was destroyed by his punch, it wouldn't hurt too much of its vitality. This was because the myriad worlds diagram was a top-grade Dao tool. On the contrary, Yi Shiwen's body was only weak under the cover of the time robe. There was no way to compare it. Compared to the myriad worlds diagram, the sky-splitting spear's evil spirit was heavier, and its killing power was more powerful. When the myriad worlds diagram fought with it, it was more or less at a disadvantage. However, the sky-splitting spear was completely different. It was born to fight. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't discouraged. In the future, he would reach such a realm sooner or later. He might even surpass such a realm. It wasn't a big deal that he was inferior to others now. Clang! The sky-splitting spear instantly shot out. It transformed into a middle-aged man dressed in a luxurious robe. He held his body in his hand and thrust the spear straight at Yi Shiwen. The vault of heaven collapsed. A galaxy was shattered on the spot and exploded. His target was Yi Shiwen's forehead. He didn't give Yi Shiwen a chance to breathe. He wanted to kill Yi Shiwen completely. You're just a dead thing that doesn't even have a tool spirit. Do you still want to go against the heavens? The sky-splitting spear said coldly. He didn't take Yi Shiwen seriously at all. In fact, he didn't even care about him. Don't think too highly of yourself. You're just a group of stray dogs. Yi Shiwen said coldly. His whole body was boiling, as if a flame was burning. Such a battle was enough to shock the world. The battle of the 10 great divine kings was not worth mentioning compared to this. Such a battle alarmed the entire star region. The entire battlefield was as big as a star region. One could imagine how huge this place was. However, The battle between the two sides was noticed by the entire battlefield. King Lai and Golden Dragon King's faces suddenly turned ugly. They were not fools. On the contrary, they were very smart people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to cultivate to this level. They suddenly realized that the Dao tools were appearing too frequently. It was normal for one or two Dao tools to appear in such a war of extermination. After all, this was also a base of the Tian clan. It was normal for one Dao tool to appear. However, there were 3 Dao tools on the Tian clan side, and 2 Dao tools on the other side. What the hell was this? Clearly, the situation had completely gone out of their control. Not only that, but an even more terrifying aura was awakening. With their foundation, they quickly realized that it was an imperial monarch. An imperial monarch was awakening. But how could an imperial monarch be awakening under such circumstances? Soon, they received the news from the retreating 8th Legion that an emperor's corpse had recovered. This was simply a conspiracy of the Tian clan. Even if they had been in battle for a long time, they suddenly felt their hair stand on end. An emperor's corpse had recovered. How terrifying was this? The recovery of an emperor's corpse had greatly damaged the vitality of all the heavens and realms. Even now, it was still mentioned with fear. Coupled with the collective recovery of several Dao tools, it made them even more aware of the seriousness of the current situation. Almost immediately, they gave the order for the Allied forces to escape from the battlefield, and they would stay behind to bring up the rear. However, at this time it seemed to be a little too late. Compared to the 8th Legion, which was the first to rush in and see this scene, and the first to retreat, their speed of retreat was a little too late. One by one, the auras of the Dao artifacts were awakened. One by one, the deeply buried array formations were all awakened. Seeing that their scheme had been exposed, the Tian clan simply revealed their ferocious claws and fangs. They directly began to surround the battlefield. A towering figure like a mountain appeared on the battlefield. That terrifying aura even penetrated the various formations of the entire battlefield, making people feel it. Many people were terrified. There were even some demigods who knelt on the ground in fear. Boom! This towering figure instantly attacked, and a big hand suddenly pressed down. Even the galaxy in the sky cracked in response. Many experts of the Allied forces who were fleeing on the way didn't have time to escape and were directly slapped. Their bodies all exploded and turned into a mass of blood essence. Then, this huge figure opened its mouth and suddenly sucked it in. It was as if it was absorbing the essence of heaven and earth. Thousands of experts didn't have time to react and were swallowed into its stomach. It was a tragic sight. Go quickly! The Golden Dragon King roared. Seeing that the Emperor's corpse had attacked again, he didn't dare to hesitate anymore. The ancestral dragon seal on his body suddenly flew out and turned into a giant chaotic dragon that was tens of millions of feet long. It roared at the sky and rushed towards the Emperor's corpse, directly launching a fierce battle. Chapter 2756. The ancestral dragon seal transformed into the terrifying body of the ancestral dragon. It was tens of thousands of feet long, stirring up the winds and clouds. The terrifying power that belonged to an emperor was awakening. Roar! With a loud roar, the emperor's corpse slapped down directly on the ancestral dragon's body. A burst of blazing light burst out, as if the end of the world was coming. The stars in the sky were slapped down and then suddenly exploded. It was a speed that surpassed everything. Such speed and power seemed to have reached the extreme of the world. Boom! That one flew up against the wind, but its entire front leg was torn off by the emperor's corpse, and its spiritual body exploded. The power of a Dao tool was invincible. Even a quasi-emperor would find it difficult to compete with it. However, this was completely different. This was an emperor's corpse, which belonged to the body of an emperor. Although it was not a real emperor, its physical body alone was enough to sweep the world. Fortunately, this was not the recovery of a real emperor. Otherwise, even if the Dao tool was fully awakened, it would be difficult to resist the power of a real emperor. Boom! This emperor's corpse was too powerful. In the blink of an eye, the battlefield was torn apart. Some experts of the Allied forces who could not escape in time were instantly blown up along with the battlefield. Even if the ancestral dragon seal was fully awakened, it still suffered a great loss in the face of a powerful emperor's corpse. Emperor's corpse, it's really an emperor's corpse? The Golden Dragon King's face was extremely ugly. This time he was doomed. If it wasn't for someone on Yi Shiwen's side who revealed the news first, if it wasn't for the fact that he felt his heart was beating fast and that it was extremely dangerous before he set off, and simply brought the ancestral dragon seal with him, this time he would not only be doomed, but would be completely dead. On the other side of the battlefield, there was also a battle of Dao tool level, which showed that the Tian clan did not happen to have a Dao tool at all. It was clearly a calculated battle, a trap, waiting for them to step into it. This time, they were really going to suffer a great loss. Right now, they had to try their best to block a little bit of the sovereign corpse. He had already sent a message to the outside of the battlefield. This time, he was not the only one who had brought a Dao artifact. When the time came, the combined strength of everyone should be enough to suppress this heaven-defying sovereign corpse. During the era when all the imperial monarchs had vanished, the various powers had a tacit understanding, and when they encountered such a shocking calamity, they would usually join forces to revive the Dao artifacts to suppress it. Under such circumstances, even a true imperial monarch would absolutely not dare to act against them. In this clash, the ancestral dragon seal was at a disadvantage. Fortunately, the other party was not a true sovereign emperor. It's actually Emperor Ling Tian. After so many years, we still have the chance to fight. The ancestral dragon seal spoke. After the smoke and dust dispersed, he recognized the origin of this emperor corpse. It's actually Imperial Monarch Ling Tian. The Golden Dragon King couldn't help but frown. This was the celestial race's celestial emperor from back then. However, he wasn't the strongest among the celestial emperors back then. But even so, he had obtained the Dao and become an existence of the celestial emperor. Even if he had transformed into an emperor corpse, his strength was definitely not something that ordinary people could imagine. In that case, this battlefield is the battlefield where Imperial Monarch Ling Tian was buried all those years ago. The Golden Dragon King suddenly thought of many things. However, celestial emperors are protected by the laws of heaven and earth, so it's impossible for them to transform naturally. He didn't transform, but his corpse was controlled by someone. The ancestral dragon seal's voice sounded out. Being controlled by someone, as expected, it's definitely related to the celestial race. The Golden Dragon King said, "However, Ancestor, can you stop him? If he had truly awakened, then I might not be able to stop him. However, he's only being controlled by someone, so I can still give it a try." However, the main point is that the celestial race has obviously come prepared this time. If we don't prepare in advance, then this time, the allied forces of the various races will probably fall here and suffer a great loss. As the ancestral dragon seal spoke, he let out a long roar and charged above the river of stars. A dragon tail slashed down like a river of stars exploding, and it directly swung towards Imperial Monarch Ling Tian's head. Even a world would be completely turned into powder under this tail. Bang! Imperial Monarch Ling Tian raised his hand and resisted this fatal blow. After that, he blasted out a punch that shook the heavens and the earth. This punch shook the heavens and the earth, and it directly blasted a large hole in the enormous body of the ancestral dragon. Instantly, the entire ancestral dragon's artifact spirit body was unstable, and it showed signs of collapse. It was extremely terrifying. Blood splattered out, and bone fragments fluttered in the air. Although it was only a spirit body, it was already comparable to a mortal's physical body. "A mere Dao artifact wants to stop me?" A cold voice came from within Imperial Monarch Ling Tian's body, but it wasn't the voice of Imperial Monarch Ling Tian himself. If Yi Shiwen was here, he would be able to recognize that it was none other than Di Ni's voice. At this moment, the person who was controlling Imperial Monarch Ling Tian's corpse was none other than Di Ni. At this moment, DNI had completely integrated into Imperial Monarch Ling Tian's body, and there were circles of jade green light around him. It was precisely the opportunity to attain Tao that was protecting him. If it wasn't for this, how could he get close to the Emperor's corpse? The Emperor's corpse could casually cut down the stars, and it was impossible to control the Emperor's corpse. Controlling the Emperor's corpse was in itself a heaven-defying act. You're just an ant borrowing the power of the Emperor's corpse. Normally, I can trample tens of thousands of ants like you to death. The ancestral dragon seal sneered and said, "You want to go against the heavens with just the help of a body? It's enough to defeat you. A Tao artifact, get out of my way." Dini's voice came from the Emperor's corpse, although he was only controlling the corpse of Imperial Monarch Ling Tian, and it was impossible for him to truly use all the magical powers of Imperial Monarch Ling Tian when he was alive. The strength that this Emperor's corpse could instinctively erupt was very limited. Compared to when he was at his peak, he was naturally not on the same level. However, there was no opponent of that level now. The Emperor's corpse suddenly attacked and blasted out a punch. The fist energy broke through the void, and countless stars in the distance could not withstand the terrifying fist energy and exploded on the spot. The stars in the sky seemed to be pulled by this fist energy. They deviated from their positions, fell one after another, or directly exploded. The power was infinite. The ancestral dragon seal had learned its lesson this time and did not directly contend with the Emperor's corpse with its spiritual body. The spiritual body of the Tao artifact's spiritual body was very tyrannical, but it would still suffer a great loss if it contended with the physical body of an imperial monarch. Once or twice would not hurt the Emperor's vitality, but if it happened too many times, the vitality would be completely damaged. He transformed into a young man, holding the ancestral dragon seal in his hand, and began to deal with the Emperor's corpse. He did not fight it head-on again. He only wanted to cover the others to escape, and he did not really need to kill the Emperor's corpse. Moreover, he did not have the ability to do so alone. On the other side, the battle between Yi Shiwen and the sky-splitting spear and the myriad world diagram had also entered a state of full swing. The power of the two great Tao artifacts together could be imagined. Even with the protection of the time robe, Yi Shiwen was still at a disadvantage. This kind of power was even at the taboo level. Fortunately, what Yi Shiwen had learned was also extraordinary. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist and the dominator sword technique alternated and could explode the power of the time robe to the maximum, as if a real imperial monarch was fighting. Even if the entire battlefield was protected by the rules of heaven and earth, it could not be maintained at this time. Everything was destroyed, as if it was the end of the world. On the other side, the Tianqi Emperor's sword was completely anxious. He had been swallowed by the sea of blood, but whether it was the myriad world diagram or the sky-splitting spear, they were all held up by Yi Shiwen, and his greatest hope, the Emperor's corpse of Emperor Ling Tian, was held up by the ancestral dragon seal, extinguishing his last hope. "Help me hold them back. I just need a little more to succeed." The Avicii sword's voice was a little hurried, and it was unprecedented for it to be in such a situation. "Okay," Yi Shiwen shouted. He was also very clear that the stronger the Avicii sword was, the better it was for him. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. He blasted out a punch, and the fist energy was almost crystal clear, burning fiercely. Under the wrapping of the power of time, it revealed a 7-colored color, almost reaching the extreme, and a huge explosion sounded in the world. "You want to stop the two of us by yourself? What a joke." The sky-splitting spear took the lead, holding the sky-splitting spear, and directly blasted towards Yi Shiwen, colliding with Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Bang! A huge explosion sounded, the world collapsed, and the universe exploded. Yi Shiwen was not willing to give up, and he was also happy to do so. With the time robe, he was not afraid of close combat, but what he was really afraid of was the collision of the rules and the way, which was what he lacked. The gap between the realms was completely reflected at this time. The sky-splitting spear was a little strange. It was actually unable to shatter Yi Shiwen's fist with one strike. This was impossible in itself. The sky-splitting spear could even split the heavens, let alone a mere fist. Even a god king wearing the chrono robe should not be able to withstand his spear attack. I will deal with him. You go to the side to help the Tianqi Emperor's sword. We must not let the Avicii sword swallow him. The sky-splitting spear said to the Myriad Worlds diagram. Although the Myriad Worlds diagram was a little dissatisfied with the commanding tone of the sky-splitting spear, it also knew that at this time, it should not care about this matter. Immediately rolled up a ball of light and fled in the direction of the Tianqi Emperor's sword. You be careful. Don't fail miserably in the gutter. Fail miserably in the gutter. Ha ha. How is that possible? See if I don't directly stab him to death. The sky-splitting spear had a gloomy look on its face as it rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. The sky-splitting spear had given birth to spiritual wisdom. It was already an invincible Emperor Taoist tool in the world. It had been proud and aloof all its life. It wasn't inferior to an Emperor Taoist tool. Yi Shiwen might be a little tricky to deal with, but that was all. Want to leave? Stay. Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand and grabbed at the Myriad Worlds diagram. Chapter 2757. The Avicii sword was devouring the Tianqi Emperor's sword. It was the most critical moment. Yi Shiwen wanted to stall for time, so he couldn't let the Myriad Worlds diagram cause trouble. This was a contest to the supreme level. Every minute and every second of such a battle was a learning experience for Yi Shiwen. It was an experience that simply couldn't be learned anywhere else. It would be of great help to him in comprehending that realm. Who else could fight with a revived Dao tool like him when he was only in the Divine King realm? He would have been beaten to death a long time ago. Yi Shiwen's big hand fell and shrouded the sky. He directly grabbed at the Myriad Worlds diagram that had turned into a ball of light. Yi Shiwen grabbed at the Myriad Worlds diagram. The Myriad Worlds diagram was furious. This human kid was underestimating it. He wanted to stop it when there was an opponent. The sky-splitting spear was even more furious. He felt that he had been completely underestimated by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had gone too far. However, Yi Shiwen's attack was very decisive. He instantly blocked the Myriad Worlds diagram. If you want to pass, you have to defeat me first. The space wings behind Yi Shiwen kept flapping. It was unknown when he had blocked the path of the Myriad Worlds diagram. Well, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. The Sky Splitter's face was gloomy. Ever since he started his cultivation, he had never encountered such a troublesome opponent. Relying on the protection of the Robe of Time, Yi Shiwen actually dared to fight them head-on. This was unprecedented. He roared, and his spear broke through the sky. He attacked Yi Shiwen. On the other side, the Myriad Worlds diagram directly evolved into a world and suppressed Yi Shiwen. The two Dao tools had completely joined forces. They planned to get rid of Yi Shiwen first. As for the Tianqi Emperor's sword, there was nothing they could do. They were entangled by Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 The battle was still going on fiercely. Yi Shiwen was at a complete disadvantage. However, his face was unusually excited. He didn't dare to be careless even though he had the protection of the time robe. After all, a moment of carelessness could very well cause him to die without a burial place. Yi Shiwen had been fighting fiercely. This was not an exaggeration. He knew very well that given his current strength, he definitely did not have the qualifications to fight against these awakened Dao weapons. He was merely borrowing the power of the time robe. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was impossible for ordinary people to have such an opportunity. If others had such an opportunity, they would go completely crazy and hope to fight against these Dao artifacts. It felt as if he was fighting against a weakened version of the Emperor. Moreover, he had the protection of the time magic robe. Therefore, he had dared to attack. However, there was still a possibility that he would die. Yi Shiwen raised his spirit to the limit. He was in a state of emptiness. He was in an unprecedented state of enlightenment. Every time he attacked, his perception would deepen. This was a situation that could only be achieved when one's potential erupted to the limit in an extremely dangerous situation. And now, Yi Shiwen had already unleashed his potential to the limit. These weren't some 10 great divine kings, but genuine Tao tools. Yi Shiwen's progress was also very obvious. Although he was still in a disadvantageous position, but from the beginning, he could only fight back a few times. Now he could gradually fight back, although he still didn't have the upper hand, but it was already extremely amazing. Slowly, Yi Shiwen, the Sky Splitter Spear, and the Myriad Worlds diagram began to attack and defend each other. However, as time passed, he began to gradually become anxious. As time passed, his wealth was also consumed at an alarming rate. Once his wealth was consumed, he might not be able to provide the energy of the time magic robe with his own strength. He dared to fight against the Tao tools because he relied on the power of the time magic robe. If the time magic robe was also useless, he might not be far from death. However, there was no further news from the Avicii sword. He didn't know how far it had progressed. On the other side, the Sky Splitter Spear and the Myriad Worlds diagram were even more depressed. The two of them couldn't defeat Yi Shiwen even when they joined forces. Yi Shiwen alone was not a big deal. However, the time magic robe was too terrifying. It could actually burst out such a terrifying power without a tool spirit. Moreover, it was both offensive and defensive. When it defended, it erased all traces of existence with the law of time. When it attacked, its offensive power was added to an unimaginable level. Even they couldn't bear it. If this continued, they were afraid that the Avicii sword would really succeed. At this time, on the battlefield, the aura of other Tao tools was recovering. Not only in the battlefield, but also outside the battlefield. The two of them were very clear that the Heavenly Clan army should have arrived. The entire formation was activated and began to encircle the allied forces of various races. However, it was useless. For a while, the Tao tools over there wouldn't be able to catch up. Moreover, they still had to suppress the other Tao tools in the allied forces of various races. They could only rely on themselves. Both sides began to get anxious. Regardless of anything else, they began to attack in a frenzy. Each of their attacks was deadly. However, the overall situation was still in a complete deadlock. Yi Shiwen had the protection of the time robe, and had dared to forcefully resist the attacks of both of them. On the other side, the battle between the Ancestral Dragon Seal and the Emperor's Corpse had also reached a white-hot stage. After some entanglement, the Ancestral Dragon Seal had completely fallen into a disadvantageous position. Although its strength was extremely strong, it was still not enough to compete with the Emperor's Corpse. Even if the Emperor's Corpse only relied on its tyrannical physical body, it was enough to rampage and defeat all strong enemies. The body that was shrouded in endless chaos contained unimaginable power. Although it didn't directly transform into a spiritual body to fight with the opponent, the spiritual body of the Ancestral Dragon Seal was still badly damaged after a series of battles. One of its arms was directly torn off. In such an intense battle, it didn't even have time to recover the burn arm. It could only fight with the opponent with one arm. Below, the Golden Dragon King was constantly burning its spiritual power to support the battle of the Ancestral Dragon Seal. Otherwise, the Ancestral Dragon Seal would soon be unable to support itself with the energy it had accumulated. He was setting up a formation to continuously absorb powerful energy from between heaven and earth. As an ancient inheritance, the Tao tool that had been resurrected many times naturally knew what to do. However, at this moment, he was completely anxious. Originally, he only needed to stop the Emperor's corpse, and the others would naturally be able to escape. That would be enough. However, the Heavenly Clan's appetite was huge now. They intended to swallow them in one bite. A terrifying formation was developed and surrounded them at lightning speed. Those people couldn't rush out at all. Moreover, he had the ability to open a gap in the formation. Now he was entangled by the Emperor's corpse. The army was now in a dilemma. If there were formation masters in the army, it would probably take a long time to undo this formation. By that time, it would be too late. Perhaps Yi Shiwen could also do it. However, at this moment, Yi Shiwen was also blocked by two Tao tools in the distance. He only took a glance and didn't dare to be distracted. In such a battle, he was originally at a disadvantage. If he were to be distracted, he might not be far from death. He was the dignified Golden Dragon King, one of the 10 great divine kings. When had he ever been so aggrieved? At this moment, the Golden Dragon King hated the heavenly clan even more. What a big appetite, what a big ambition. Now he could only continue to wait. Wait until the Tao tools of the allied forces from all the heavens and realms dared to come one after another. Then he might be able to stop them. However, that also required time. At this moment, it was already an unprecedented danger. Yi Shiwen destroyed that formation. The energy source of this Emperor's corpse is there. The Golden Dragon King pointed to the Blood Sea formation where the Quasi-Emperor was. It was there that continuously provided the Emperor's corpse with the energy it needed to move. In order to support the battle of the ancestral dragon seal alone, he had already exhausted all his strength. He already felt that he couldn't bear it. If he hadn't come out fully prepared, he would have already failed. If the Heavenly Clan wanted to control the Emperor, the price they had to pay was more than him. The key point was the Blood Sea formation. When Yi Shiwen heard the words of the Golden Dragon King, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Right now, he couldn't even take care of himself, let alone destroy the Blood Sea formation and stop the Emperor's corpse. The sky-splitting spear also hated Yi Shiwen and kept entangling him. Bang! Yi Shiwen punched the 6 paths of reincarnation fist and sent the myriad worlds diagram flying. Then, he teleported thousands of miles away. The place where he was just standing had been torn apart by the sky-splitting spear. The spear light was cold and dazzling the world. His back was completely wet. If he hadn't reacted fast enough just now, he would have been pierced by the spear. Such a battle really didn't allow him to be distracted. Otherwise, even with the protection of the time robe, he would be seriously injured. Die! The sky-splitting spear's face was ferocious. For him, being delayed by Yi Shiwen until now was a great humiliation. He was furious. Once again, he blasted his spear towards Yi Shiwen. Oh no! At this moment, Yi Shiwen felt that the wealth in his Tianyuan mirror had been exhausted. Everything that could be burned had been burned. Such a battle consumed too much energy, especially since he hadn't reached this realm yet. The result of forcefully fighting would be that he would be back to his original state overnight. Clang! Just as the spear light was about to fall on Yi Shiwen's body, a sword light tore through the sky and slashed the spear light in an instant. The sword light annihilated the spear light and disappeared without a trace. Let's go! God knew when the Avicii sword had appeared beside Yi Shiwen. You've succeeded? Yi Shiwen asked in surprise. Yes, that's right. Now let's retreat quickly. The Avicii sword nodded and didn't say anything. It turned into a sky full of blood light, wrapped around Yi Shiwen, and swept out of the battlefield. Chapter 2758. Wait a minute. Watch my last punch. Yi Shiwen let out a long roar, and the power of his whole body rose to the extreme. His spiritual power burned crazily, and the laws of boxing all manifested and spread out, condensing on Yi Shiwen's fist. The fist energy was like a rising dragon, soaring into the sky, piercing through the sky, and then fell from the sky, falling into the Blood Sea formation. Boom! The sky and the earth shook, the world roared, and the great Tao appeared one after another. This was Yi Shiwen's attack with the last of his energy, turning into a huge dragon, rushing into the Blood Sea formation in an instant, and then exploded with a bang. It was like the power of chaos, smashing everything in this instant. The entire Blood Sea formation shook violently, and the terrifying power spread, overflowing in all directions. Many Tian clan deities spat out a mouthful of blood and were seriously injured in an instant. Some with lower cultivation were even worse off and were directly blasted away. Not only was Yi Shiwen's terrifying power equivalent to the full power of a Tao tool, even a quasi-emperor would not feel good if they were to take it head-on, let alone these deities. With the protection of the formation, they were not directly blasted into pieces, but at the same time, it was the power of the backlash after the formation was shaken that directly caused them to be seriously injured and blasted away. The old quasi-emperor of the Tian clan was instantly enraged, and he roared angrily, chase after him. The entire formation was completely disrupted, and at this time, the Emperor's corpse that was entangled with the ancestral dragon seal suddenly seemed to become sluggish and completely stopped. How could this be? DNI also did not react for a while. Although he looked majestic and even controlled the Emperor's corpse, in reality, with his original strength, it was not enough to control the Emperor's corpse. With his cultivation alone, it was impossible to do this. If it was so simple, then in history, those fallen emperors would have continuously come out to cause trouble. Even the Golden Dragon King couldn't figure out what had happened. He only saw that the majestic emperor's corpse had suddenly become motionless. Obviously, something had gone wrong. He immediately thought of the only possibility that could have caused this. Yi Shiwen had succeeded. However, before he could completely react, he saw a ray of blood light directly sweeping out from the depths of the battlefield, and a figure appeared faintly in it. Hurry up and go! The Golden Dragon King immediately recognized that it was Yi Shiwen's voice. He immediately understood that his guess was correct. At this moment, he didn't dare to stay any longer. Behind Yi Shiwen, the Sky Splitter Spear and the Myriad Worlds diagram caught up with him at an extremely fast speed. Their faces were somewhat ferocious. They were naturally incomparably furious after being tricked by Yi Shiwen. With a dragon roar, the ancestral dragon seal turned into a huge dragon. It immediately carried the Golden Dragon King and fled outside. The speed of the two of them was extremely fast. Both of them were carried by the Dao tools. Their speed could be imagined. Almost in an instant, they had already rushed to the edge of the battlefield. At this moment, the edge of the battlefield was completely in a mess. The retreating Allied forces and the Heavenly Clan experts had already killed each other. The experts of the Allied forces wanted to escape, but the experts of the Heavenly Clan would not let them escape so easily. Therefore, there was also a sea of corpses and fierce battles everywhere. However, in general, the experts of the Allied forces still had the upper hand. After all, the strength was completely displayed here, and they completely had the upper hand. The experts of the Heavenly Clan only dared to restrain the Allied forces on the periphery, and did not dare to really fight with the Allied forces. But even so, there was a large formation at the edge of the battlefield that surrounded them. Even if the experts of the Allied forces of the Heavenly Clan could not pose a fatal threat to them, they could not escape. Seeing this scene, Yi Shiwen understood that he was right. The Heavenly Clan had indeed come prepared this time, and even the entire battlefield had been prepared long ago. It was all for the sake of waiting for the Allied forces of the various races to fall into the encirclement. If the elites of the Allied forces of the various races were to be swallowed, although the Allied forces of the various races would not be shaken to the core, they would not be able to launch another attack. At that time, they would be given a relatively long period of safety to develop in peace. Most importantly, they would be able to buy enough time for the Emperor to obtain the Tao. Boom! A blood-red light fell down, and many of the Tian clan experts who were restraining the outside exploded one after another. They were killed on the spot by the blood-red sword beam, and did not have the strength to retaliate at all. The power of this Tao artifact could be imagined. This was precisely Yi Shiwen's attack with the Avicii sword in his hand. At this moment, the artifact spirit of the Avicii sword had once again returned to its slumber. This time, it had only forcefully swallowed the Heavenly Awakening Emperor's sword, but it would still need a long period of time to completely devour it. During this period of time, although Yi Shiwen could still borrow a portion of the Avicii sword's power, it was impossible for him to awaken again. Yi Shiwen had no other choice. Fortunately, he still had the time robe. As long as he had enough resources, the time robe would be able to unleash enough power and could even resist other awakened Tao tools. On the Ancestral Dragon Seal, the Golden Dragon King also made his move. The Ancestral Dragon Seal smashed down, sweeping all the Heavenly Clan away and swallowing them in one gulp. Not good. We can't stay here any longer. They're chasing after us, Yi Shiwen said loudly. He no longer chased after the experts of the Heavenly Clan. Instead, he slashed out with his sword. Boom! There was a loud roar, and the great formation shook. The earth shook, and the mountains shook. A big hole appeared in the originally indestructible Great Formation. Although there was no way to completely break it, the Avicii sword was extraordinary after all. It was able to break a big hole in the Great Formation. However, the entire array was still recovering by itself, and the big hole was slowly recovering. "Hurry up and go," Yi Shiwen said. Only then did everyone finally react, and they quickly rushed out. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen and the Golden Dragon King continued to attack, and the whole big hole was a little bigger. Otherwise, only those people could escape, and the war beasts and the war fortress would probably be left behind. In just a few breaths, the experts of the allied forces of the various races who were able to escape had all disappeared. After all, they were gods, or at least demigods. With such strength, it was enough for them to make a huge response in an instant. In the distance, Yi Shiwen could gradually feel the sky splitter spear and the myriad worlds diagram chasing after him. Even the Emperor's corpse, Yi Shiwen had gradually felt its power recovering, and the strong pressure even caused the entire Great Array to begin to recover faster. "Damn it, don't go!" The sky splitter spear roared ferociously and turned into a group of spear lights. At this time, it had finally caught up to the edge of the battlefield. It was flustered from being chased by Yi Shiwen before, and now it finally reacted. However, at this time, the allied forces had almost retreated, and the experts of the Heavenly Clan who were at the side did not dare to go forward at all. What a joke! Both of them were experts of the 10 Great Divine Kings level, and they also had Dao tools in their hands. It was simply a big evil star. Who would dare to go forward? Although they were loyal to the Heavenly Clan, they still did not dare to joke around with their own lives. Boom! The sky splitter spear hurriedly blasted down like a river of stars, and those who retreated a little slower had no time to escape at this time, and were bombarded into pieces one after another. At this time, Yi Shiwen and the Golden Dragon King did not dare to stay, and hurriedly escaped from the battlefield. Especially Yi Shiwen. He knew very well that the sky-splitting spear and the myriad worlds diagram hated him the most. Not to mention the fact that he had ruined their plans. The Avicii sword had even swallowed the Tianqi Emperor's sword directly. There was no greater hatred between them. When Yi Shiwen left the battlefield, he discovered that the battle outside was also intense. The troops of the allied forces of the various races had already started fighting with the troops of the allied forces of the Heavenly Clan. In the distance, there were even collisions of Dao tools. It was extremely intense. It was the Demon Emperor's bell, and Yi Wudi had personally arrived. Compared to the few legions that had already received the news, the legions that had stayed outside suffered greater losses. They were suddenly attacked by the allied forces of the Heavenly Clan, especially the joint attack of a few Dao tools. They had actually defeated the allied forces of the various races. Although the allied forces of the various races had already made preparations for a great battle between Dao tools, they never thought that it would turn out like this all of a sudden. The Tian clan allied forces had actually brought so many Dao tools, and just from what Yi Shiwen could sense, there were actually as many as 4 of them. On the side of the allied forces, other than Yi Wudi, who was also the Demon Emperor bell brought by the ancient heavenly court, only the 100-bird Phoenix Palace brought by the martial sect was barely able to block the opponent. The situation was stabilized. If it wasn't for the fact that the strength of the allied forces of the various races had completely surpassed that of the allied forces of the Heavenly Clan, they would have already collapsed a long time ago. There was almost no need to discuss. When the allied forces of the various races retreated from the battlefield, the higher-ups of the various sides almost tacitly chose to retreat. This battle was obviously set up by the Heavenly Clan, and everyone had fallen for it if they weren't careful. Furthermore, they had suffered heavy losses. However, even if they chose to retreat, it would be useless. Not only did the heaven-splitting spear and the myriad worlds diagram join the siege, there was also the Emperor Ni controlling the Emperor corpse to rampage out. Wherever it went, it would completely collapse, and the army would suffer heavy losses. Only the Golden Dragon King's ancestral dragon seal still had the ability to fight, and Yi Shiwen could only rely on the Avicii sword to restrain them from time to time. He could no longer activate the time robe, so he couldn't help at all. The army was routed for millions of miles, continuously retreating, fighting and retreating, allowing the allied forces of the Heavenly Clan to beat them down, killing them all the way. With a few Dao tools, coupled with the chaos caused by the Emperor corpse, the allied forces of the various races couldn't even muster up a decent resistance. It wasn't until the experts from all sides received the news and came to the rescue with their Dao tools that the allied forces of the Heavenly Clan retreated. For a time, there were bones all along the way, mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Chapter 2759. The scene of the Alliance army being ambushed, a path of white bones, a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, spread throughout the entire world overnight. For a moment, everyone was shocked. No one thought that it would turn out like this. In many people's rumors, this should be the last battle to determine the world. As long as they dealt with D&I in this battle, the Tian clan would continue to be obedient for tens of thousands of years. They would not have to worry about the threat of the Tian clan for a long time. Who would have thought that this would be the result? Not only did they not cripple the Tian clan, they were the ones who were crippled by the Tian clan. At first, everyone did not believe it at all. They thought that it was the remnants of the Tian clan spreading fake news. But later on, more and more news came, and everyone could not help but believe it. More importantly, a lot of the news was reasonable. And when the army retreated back to the headquarters, the miserable situation immediately confirmed this news. It was not just news, but a fact. There was an uproar, especially among the races that had sent out troops. It was simply too tragic to look at. The bigger the race, the more they suffered. Many of their experts had fallen in this battle. At first, everyone did not understand what had happened. They were clearly about to succeed, but why were they counterattacked instead? Later on, they found out that the Tian clan had used several Dao tools and a powerful Emperor corpse to wreak havoc in the world. If not for the fact that they were locked by the laws of heaven and earth and could not leave the vicinity of the battlefield, the losses of the Alliance army would have been even heavier. More importantly, they had all heard that the experts of the Tian clan had actually sent out a quasi-emperor level expert, which made the various races even more excited, especially those powerful races and powers who were clamoring for revenge and definitely could not let them off easily. Because it involved quasi-emperor level experts, all the races were completely enraged. According to the tacit agreement of the various races, quasi-emperor level experts were not allowed to interfere in the struggles of the various forces. Otherwise, with their powerful strength, even if they could not compare to the destructive power of the emperor, they would not be much better after fighting for so many years. As a result, even the various races and the Tian clan had this kind of tacit understanding. The Tian clan was also eager for this to happen because in all aspects, the allied forces of the various races had the upper hand. They were just some leftovers who were struggling to survive. They had no other choice. In the end, the Celestials broke the rules first. Moreover, quasi-emperor experts were only a step away from truly attaining the Tao. Under normal circumstances, they would not be willing to get involved in such worldly matters. Before they made their move, the allied forces of the various races had already made their preparations. They had already asked the ancestors of the allied forces to take action and monitor the Tian clan's quasi-emperor experts and restrain them. Who would have thought that another quasi-emperor would appear? This was the reason why everyone had miscalculated. If there was no quasi-emperor, how could the Tian race control the emperor corpse? This was not something an ordinary person could do. In the beginning, everyone was very curious as to what kind of expert had made a move. Later on, they slowly found out that the quasi-emperor on the battlefield had already fallen 10 million years ago and had not appeared in front of everyone for a full 10 million years. Thus, everyone had tacitly agreed that he had already died. Thus, they did not expect that this person would appear. This was why they had miscalculated and suffered heavy losses under the attack of the Tian clan. However, it was also because of this that everyone finally saw clearly that the Tian clan was indeed prepared. In order to buy time, they had already used any means necessary. Letting the quasi-emperor interfere in the war between the races was a very bad example. Once it started, all sides would not have any scruples. In this regard, the allied forces of the various races had a complete advantage. It was also because of this that the allied forces of the various races never thought that the Tian clan would dare to do this. However, there were also some people who suddenly realized that they had already reached the point where their race was about to be exterminated. How could the Tian clan still follow any rules? However, the news from the battlefield gradually came back. According to the statistics, although the losses were heavy, it was better than the initial expectation that the entire army might be annihilated. Especially the few legions inside the battlefield did not suffer heavy losses and escaped. All of this was thanks to Yi Shiwen's discovery in advance, and the news was passed out in advance. Otherwise, they would not even be able to escape from the battlefield and would be killed. In that case, the losses would be even more disastrous. For a time, it was unknown how many forces owed Yi Shiwen a favor, especially the matter of Yi Shiwen and the Golden Dragon King blocking the Dao tool, which made many people sigh with emotion. When they sent Yi Shiwen there previously, they only hoped that he could fill in for the Pure Moon King. Who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would play such an important role in this battle? If it weren't for Yi Shiwen, their losses would have been far more severe. Many people changed their views on Yi Shiwen because of this. In addition to the fact that Yi Shiwen had saved their people, more importantly, Yi Shiwen actually dared to clash head-on with the Dao tool. This in itself had already surpassed the battle prowess of the 10 great divine kings. When many people heard of his battle achievements, they were already terrified. How would they still dare to have the thought of finding trouble with him again? Not only was it still in chaos now, but the losses of all parties also needed to be calculated. All parties were still in chaos. Most importantly, the higher-ups of the allied forces were furious. All parties led by the immortal Copper King began to thoroughly investigate the spies in the allied forces. In this battle, the allied forces of the various races actually fell into a trap without realizing it. This itself meant that there was a huge problem in it. In particular, the Tian clan had obviously prepared for this battle. It was impossible for them to come at the last minute. It must have been premeditated. In this regard, the allied forces of the various races were actually unaware of it. Or perhaps, although there were some warning signs, it was covered up by someone. Someone must come out to take responsibility for this and quell the anger of the masses. Because it wasn't a single force that suffered heavy losses, but all the realms and the major king sects suffered heavy losses. It was just a matter of how many. Moreover, this battle also sounded an alarm for everyone. If these spies were allowed to continue to be in the higher-ups of the allied forces, it was unknown what would happen. Therefore, after gathering the defeated soldiers a little, the higher-ups of the allied forces began to thoroughly investigate. If it was said that such a thorough investigation of spies in the past might cause some people to be dissatisfied, then with this fiasco, no one dared to oppose it anymore. Otherwise, they would be going against the various races of the heavens and realms. The problem was actually found out. Several king sects were mixed in. They were the chess pieces that the Tian clan had buried many years ago, but they had never moved. Therefore, no one knew their true identity at all. Countless years ago, when the Tian clan was still very prosperous, although there were dragons, phoenixes, and Qilins that stood up against the Tian clan, there were also many races that prostrated themselves under the Tian clan, willing to be their claws and teeth. These chess pieces were all buried at that time. The Tian clan was also very patient. Even when they were defeated twice in the war against the heavens, they still didn't use these chess pieces. Now that they used them, they were discovered. If they didn't use them, then they wouldn't be discovered even after 10 million years. But once they did, they would leave behind traces. With the abilities of the higher-ups of the allied forces, they were easily discovered. No matter how well they hid, they couldn't escape the experts of the various races. Apart from these few king sects, there was also a large group of people who had come out of sects like pulling out a carrot and bringing out the mud. Among these king sects, not everyone knew about this, and not everyone participated. But at this time, no one cared about this. They had already been buried by the anger of the allied forces. The Allied forces were also very clear that someone had to stand up to quell the anger of the Allied forces. Otherwise, their plans were not detailed, and there were flaws in the higher-ups of the Allied forces. They might become the targets of the experts of the various races to vent their anger. Although they were all king's sects, they didn't dare to really offend the public. As the saying goes, the will of the heavens is the will of the people. If such a level of anger was set off, they might also die without a burial place. In such a bloody and chaotic situation, Yi Shiwen didn't stay. Instead, he directly went to find Yi Mo. Yi Mo had sent someone to inform him before, asking him to look for him immediately after everything was over. But now, he didn't expect that the situation would develop into such a complete mess. At this time, Yi Mo was not everywhere, but in the Devil King's treasure house, waiting for him. This was because he now held the key to the Devil King's treasure house. Without Yi Shiwen, even Yi Mo couldn't open the last layer. Yi Mo, who was practicing in the treasure house, didn't expect that the situation would actually deteriorate to such an extent. When Yi Shiwen told him about the situation, even with his temperament and cultivation, he was a little dumbfounded. How generous! How generous! Yi Mo couldn't help but murmur to himself. No wonder when I was investigating the whereabouts of the NID, I felt that the Tian clan seemed to be planning something. The appetite of these Tian clan is really big. Yi Shiwen squinted his eyes and said, even I was almost buried in it and couldn't escape. Yi Shiwen explained the specific situation to Yi Mo. Yi Mo was silent for a while and said, it's a good thing that the Avicii sword can devour the Tianqi Emperor's sword, but if you want to further control the Avicii sword, it will be more difficult. The stronger it is, the stronger its independent mind is. It has a fierce reputation in the past, and not ordinary people can control it. Well, I understand. Yi Shiwen nodded. He had already felt that with the strengthening of the Avicii sword, his control of the Avicii sword had weakened a little. This could be regarded as a mixed blessing. I called you here to open the last layer of the Devil King's treasure house. With the support of the resources in the treasure house, you and my cultivation will be able to go further. Chapter 2760. In the last floor of the Demon King's treasury, there were the last treasures left by the Demon King. This was also the last blessing left by the Demon King for his inheritor. Although Yi Shiwen was the inheritor of the Demon King chosen by Yi Mo, he was not a demon and had no intention of becoming the Demon King's inheritor. In the early years, Yi Shiwen only felt that as the inheritor of the Demon King, he could not gain a foothold in the human race. He still could not let go of his heart as a human. Now, he had already transcended this step. Even if he casually used the martial arts of the demon race, who would say that he was a demon? It was just that at this point, he was no longer willing to simply become the inheritor of someone. He wanted to walk a path that belonged to himself. This was destined to be an unprecedented lonely path. The methods of others could be used as a reference, but he could not have the thought of becoming an inheritor. Otherwise, he was destined to be bound. Every emperor king could be said to be in existence that had reached the peak of their own path. If the future generations followed this path, then they were destined to be unable to surpass, let alone achieve the Tao. With the help of the Demon King's treasury, Yi Shiwen's strength improved even faster. Although he had a miraculous item like the Tao fruit, if he wanted to fully display the effect of the Tao fruit, he needed countless wealth and resources to support it. Otherwise, it would be a waste. Normally, it was fine to slowly improve. But now, the world had changed greatly and the Tian clan was in chaos. It was no longer allowed for him to slowly improve. He already had a faint premonition that a great calamity was in front of him. If there was no way to improve his strength to a certain level before the great calamity arrived, even self-protection would become a huge problem. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen did not dare to delay the slightest bit. The third floor of the Demon King's treasury slowly opened. The treasure aura that rushed out illuminated the entire treasury. Behind Yi Shiwen, Star Beast and Illusory Sky Divine Python were completely stunned. Everything in front of them was like a dream. Among the several floors of the Demon King's treasury, this was the richest one. Not only were there many rare or unseen heavenly treasures prepared by the Demon King, but more importantly, in the center of the third floor, a huge ocean appeared in front of everyone. This golden ocean exuded unimaginably terrifying elixir aura. In the sky, it condensed into golden clouds in the sky. What is this? Why are there such terrifying energy fluctuations? The illusory sky divine python was left dumbstruck. It had followed Yi Shiwen to fight all over the place during this period of time. It hadn't had many opportunities to fight. However, it was still much better than when it had been in the ghost domain. The more time passed, the more he felt that following Yi Shiwen was indeed the right choice. Yi Shiwen looked into the distance and saw that this golden energy ocean was actually composed of fist-sized crystals. It looked boundless. It looked like a vast ocean from afar. The surging energy was surging violently, and it seemed as if the raging waves were beating against the shore. This is the Emperor Origin. Yes, it's the Emperor Origin. Yi Mo exclaimed in shock. No one knew better than him what it was. Just like how gods had their own source that could condense God's source, Imperial Lords also had their own source that could be condensed, and that was the Imperial Lord's source. However, compared to the divine source, it was many times more precious. The only difference was that the divine source was very widespread in the universe. As long as one was a deity, they would be able to condense it. On the other hand, the Emperor's source could only be condensed in large quantities by sovereign emperors. Therefore, it was very rare. Generally, the Emperor Origin would only be circulated in the inheritance of Emperor Lords. Generally, it was only provided to the top high-level people to use the top-level energy. Quasi-emperors could also condense a small amount of Emperor Origin because they had already reached the level of Emperor Lords to a certain extent. They could also condense a small amount of Emperor Origin. However, the amount was very small. Even they couldn't be self-sufficient, let alone circulated. Therefore, matters regarding the Emperor's origin often only existed in legends. The Emperor's origin was also a very important reason why people would flock to a place with an Emperor Lord. It wasn't that Yi Mo hadn't seen the Emperor Origin. However, he clearly remembered that his master had built this Demon King's treasure house before he had attained Tao. In other words, it was impossible for a Demon King who was only a quasi-emperor to leave behind so many Emperor Origins. Could it be that he had returned without Yi Mo knowing? There were many unanswered questions in his mind. God is really helping me. There is actually an Emperor Origin. Yi Shiwen laughed heartily. If he had the Emperor's origin, he could use it with ease. This was the energy used by the Emperor Lords. It was close to the essence of the Great Way. Just a little bit of it was equivalent to countless divine sources. Moreover, it was an entire Emperor's origin sea. He couldn't imagine how much wealth this was. It was probably comparable to the inheritance of those Emperor Lords. At this time, his heart was full of gratitude to the Demon King who he had never met. Coupled with the Tao fruit in his hand, it was enough to promote his cultivation to a new level in the shortest time. After the initial surprise, Yi Mo also revealed a happy smile. He was now stuck at the threshold of Quasi-Emperor. If he wanted to break through, he would need countless energy. He used to be a Tao tool. He was almost the incarnation of the Great Way. His understanding of the Great Way was also beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Now that he had broken away from the spiritual body and reconstructed his real body, his cultivation was naturally extremely fast. The only thing that restricted him from improving was the lack of enough energy. A 10 Great God King realm expert could absorb all the spirit energy in a 500,000-kilometer radius in one gulp. Ordinary methods could no longer satisfy his needs. If Yi Shiwen wanted to truly enter the late-stage king-rank realm, he would also need the arch origins. The appearance of this huge amount of Emperor Origin solved everyone's urgent problem. As for Star Beast and Illusory Sky Divine Python, their cultivation realm was still far from the Emperor Origin Sea. Therefore, even if it was just a piece of Emperor Origin, it was enough for them to absorb for a long time. To them, this huge Emperor Origin Sea was simply an endless amount of wealth. Everyone flew above the Emperor Origin Sea. Yi Shiwen took out the Tao fruit. The Tao fruit was emitting crystal-clear light in midair. At this time, the Great Way appeared one after another. In the sky, it was like roots extending into the void. It integrated with heaven and earth as if it was the Great Way. At the same time, in the Emperor Origin Sea below, endless energy surged into the Tao fruit. Yi Shiwen, your luck is really off the charts. Even I have only seen the existence of the Tao fruit in the ancient books. I didn't get it. Yimo looked at the Tao fruit and couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Yi Shiwen's good luck made him feel envious. Yimo's cultivation speed was fast because of his past experience as a Tao artifact in the past, which allowed him to improve so quickly. However, Yi Shiwen was purely because of his fortuitous encounters. Even many thearchs had only heard of the Tao fruit. They had never seen it. It was a good thing that could almost allow one to achieve Tao. Not everyone had the opportunity to obtain it. However, it would be a pity if you swallow this Tao fruit. Wait until it blooms and bears the great Tao flower. At that time, it will be able to bear a steady stream of Tao fruits. At that time, even if you have already become an emperor, it will still be of great benefit. Yimo said. Yimo's words made Yi Shiwen slightly startled. Indeed, what Yimo said was very tempting. However, to evolve the Tao fruit from the Tao fruit into the Tao flower, it would take a very long time. It could easily take tens of millions of years. Otherwise, only the giant beast clan would have a Tao flower in their hands. Yi Shiwen explained his concerns to Yimo. Yimo suddenly laughed and said, "This is not a problem at all. The reason why the giant beast clan needs such a long time to bear the Tao fruit is because they can't provide the energy needed for the Tao flower to bear the Tao fruit. If a Tao flower wants to bear the Tao fruit, it needs a massive amount of energy. Therefore, they can only let the Tao flower slowly absorb the energy by itself. However, it's different for you. Don't forget that there are so many Emperor origins now. It is not difficult for you to accelerate the ripening of a Tao flower in a short time. Won't there be any sequelae if you forcibly accelerate the ripening of a Tao flower?" asked Yi Shiwen. Of course not. If an ordinary heavenly treasure is forcibly ripened, it will undoubtedly destroy its quality. It is no different from burning a bird. These heavenly treasures not only need to absorb the energy between heaven and earth to grow, but they also need to constantly evolve the laws of heaven and earth so that they have magical abilities. This also requires time. However, the Tao fruit is different. The Tao fruit itself contains the laws of heaven and earth. It doesn't need to take time to evolve. As long as there is enough energy, you can even continuously accelerate the ripening of the Tao fruit. Yimo said, "Although I have never seen it, I believe that I will not be wrong. It's just that ordinary people don't have this kind of means. Except for the Emperor, who can provide the energy needed to accelerate the ripening of the Tao fruit." You are right. If I swallow it now, it will be too wasteful. I will first accelerate the ripening of a Tao flower. At that time, as long as there is a steady stream of Emperor origins, I can continue to accelerate the ripening of the Tao fruit. If I really achieve Tao one day, I don't have to worry about the speed of cultivation decreasing. Yi Shiwen said immediately. "Haha, you think so far ahead, but this is the truth." Yimo nodded. "In that case, let's start. I can't wait to accelerate the ripening of the Tao fruit. Now the world is in chaos. This time, I can't kill the Tian clan. Next time, it will be more difficult to catch them all in one fell swoop. I am afraid that D and I will achieve Tao by relying on the opportunity of becoming an emperor. If I want to catch up with his progress, I can only rely on the Tao fruit condensed by this Tao flower." Yi Shiwen revealed a somewhat impatient expression. Chapter 2761. Accelerating the ripening of the Tao fruit originally required a massive amount of energy. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had given up on this plan. Now that he had a massive amount of Emperor Source, Yi Shiwen didn't have so many scruples. The massive amount of Emperor Source continuously poured into the Tao fruit under Yi Shiwen's urging. The Tao fruit was constantly ripening. It might not have changed much in the past tens of thousands of years, but now it was transforming at a subtle change that could be seen with the naked eye. While the Tao fruit was being ripened, it was constantly emitting a kind of Tao fragrance. The fragrance of the Great Way was invisible and colorless. However, it contained the information of the Great Way when it spread out. It could promote one's cultivation. Yi Shiwen, Yi Mo, and the others were sitting around the Tao fruit. They were absorbing the Tao fragrance emitted by the Tao fruit. They were constantly absorbing the energy of the Emperor's source for cultivation. Everyone felt that their cultivation was advancing like a rocket. Originally, it would take 100 years for their cultivation to advance. But now it was advancing little by little. Behind Yi Shiwen, the enlightening mind ancient tree had taken root in the Emperor's source sea. It was constantly emitting 7 colored rays of light that enveloped everyone. This allowed them to be in the most rational state at all times. Although these people could be regarded as experts, it was impossible for them to maintain the most clear-headed state of enlightenment at all times. They had to be distracted. However, they didn't have to worry about this now that the enlightening mind ancient tree was shrouding them. Yi Shiwen's pores opened up. He was constantly absorbing the energy of the Emperor's source. Endless energy poured into his body like a raging tide. The meridians and dantian of his body were like a vast world. However, they were filled up in a short time. Then, he constantly digested, absorbed, and digested again. In such a continuous cycle, his martial power was also improving at an astonishing speed. In his body, the mysterious space didn't restrain itself this time. It started to frantically absorb it. At the same time, it continuously analyzed all the information of the Great Way that was drifting out of the Tao fruit. This allowed Yi Shiwen's comprehension of the Great Way of speed to reach a limit. It was almost the same speed as the Tao law that was spewing out from the Tao fruit. This was an extremely terrifying speed of comprehension. Even Yi Mo could only admit defeat, let alone the illusory sky divine python and the star colossus. They couldn't be compared at all. At the same time, Yi Shiwen's mind moved, and the demon calling banner flew out from his body. It transformed into an endless demon race army and plunged into the Imperial Origin Sea. If it was only an ordinary divine source, even a huge ocean wouldn't be able to withstand the absorption of these demon race army. In fact, many of them were already at the Demon King level. However, these Empyrean origins were completely different. If they wanted to completely absorb one of these Empyrean origins, they would need to expend a tremendous amount of effort. With the support of the energy of the Empyrean origins, these demon kings completed a shocking transformation. They were once invincible kings. As long as they had enough energy to support them, they could quickly recover to a shocking level. In an instant, everyone in the demon lord's treasure trove was improving crazily. They were in seclusion, and the great ways resonated. Different great ways continuously collided and created sparks. Everything was improving at a shocking speed. Time passed minute by minute. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Yi Shiwen, who was in the demon lord's treasure trove, suddenly opened his eyes. All the muscles and bones in his body stretched out, and there was a series of crackling sounds. He had been sitting there for 3 whole years. He was already used to this. A day on the mountain was equivalent to 1,000 years of cultivation on the ground. All the martial arts in his body suddenly exploded and overflowed in all directions. However, they were blocked by the boundary that he had set up. Yi Shiwen slowly heaved a sigh of relief. I've finally reached the late-stage king-ranked realm. Ha! Yi Shiwen laughed heartily. In 3 whole years, he had already reached the late-stage king-ranked realm in one go. According to his original estimation, even if he swallowed the Tao fruit and used all the divine roots, he would need at least 50 or even 100 years to break through to this stage. This was because he did not simply break through to the late-stage king-ranked realm. Instead, his battle strength had broken through to the quasi-thearch realm in one go. He was now comparable to an early-stage quasi-thearch realm martial artist. However, he had not swallowed the Tao fruit and had already reached that stage. What's more, he had only spent 3 years. This was all thanks to the existence of the Empyrean origin. Hence, one could only say that plans could not keep up with changes. In these 3 years, not only had he raised his cultivation level to the late-stage king-ranked realm, but he had also made use of this opportunity to completely deduce the other skills of the 6 Daos reincarnation fist. He was only one step away from merging the 6 paths and achieving the great perfection realm. By then, his attainment in the 6 Daos reincarnation fist would be comparable to Yi Mo's. Now, it seemed that no one in the future could surpass him. The only people who could compare to him were probably Yi Mo. Even if he had not cultivated it to the phenomenal stage, its power was already many times stronger than before. It would not be difficult for him to fight against a quasi-thearch realm martial artist. However, the time was still too short. He did not even have time to use the mysterious space to deduce the wings of time and the Supreme Emperor solution. Fortunately, he did not have much time. As long as he had enough time, it would not be difficult for him to deduce everything. As long as he had enough energy, the mysterious space would be able to deduce everything. However, in such a short period of time, his cultivation level had reached the late-stage king-ranked realm. He had also completely deduced the remaining skills of the 6 Daos reincarnation fist. The result was that more than 1/3 of the originally huge Empyrean origin C had been used up. Of course, Yi Shiwen was not the only one doing this. The Mingxin ancient tree, the Dao fruit, Yi Mo, and the others were all consuming the Empyrean origin energy. There was also the sea of demons absorbing the energy of the Empyrean origin. With enough Empyrean origin, in just 3 years, more than 100 demons had successfully recovered to the Demon King realm. Moreover, some powerful Demon Kings had already started to condense their real physical bodies instead of spiritual bodies. At that time, with a strong physical body, they would even be able to compete with experts of the same realm. They would not be like now, where they could only win by numbers. The premise of all this was that there must be enough Empyrean origin. Besides the demon summoning banner, the Tianyuan mirror and the infinite pain sword were also crazily absorbing the Empyrean origin in the Empyrean origin sea. The infinite pain sword was accelerating the refinement of the Tianqi Emperor sword and increasing its strength. The Tianyuan mirror was transforming, absorbing these Empyrean origin and transforming into a Dao tool. Now, the Tianyuan mirror was Yi Shiwen's life divine tool. The stronger it was, the stronger Yi Shiwen would naturally be. Seeing that 1/3 of the Empyrean origin sea had been consumed in just 3 years, Yi Shiwen was a little shocked. If this news were to spread, it was unknown how many people would vomit blood. How many god kings were just fighting for a piece of Empyrean origin. Yet, these people were crazily devouring the Empyrean origin. It was simply the behavior of a prodigal son. It did not matter whether they could use other things to replace it. They were all using it to absorb the Empyrean origin. Even the rich king conferring sects that had produced thearchs wanted to vomit blood. Even a prodigal son should not be squandered like this. However, even so, Yi Shiwen did not regret it. He had consumed 1/3 of the Empyrean origin sea, but the effect was too obvious. The Dao fruit was actually showing signs of blooming. This meant that if this continued, it would soon bear Dao flowers. The demon race in the demon summoning banner would be his trump card in the future. With such a large demon race army for him to command, they might be a powerful army in the future. He might have a use for them in the future. He himself had entered the late-stage king-ranked realm and was comparable to the early-stage quasi-thearch. Given his cultivation speed, it was enough to shock the world. It's time to go out and take a walk. Yi Shiwen stood up. His cultivation speed was the fastest. With the help of the mysterious space, he was almost analyzing the Dao fragrance that was coming out of the Dao fruit at the same time. Otherwise, in just 3 years, no matter how much preparation he had made, it would be impossible for him to break through to the late-stage king-ranked realm. Yi Mo, who was also breaking through, was still in seclusion. It seemed that he still needed a few more decades to break through to the quasi-thearch realm. Such a cultivation speed was enough to scare a large number of people to death in the outside world. On the other side, the illusory sky divine python had already hidden to the other side and started to go through the tribulation. It was not any other tribulation, but the divine king tribulation. The illusory sky divine python had already reached the peak of the sage realm and was only one step away from becoming a king. Now, with the power of the emperor's source, it had finally taken that step and reached an unprecedented level. On the other hand, the star beast was a little slower. Its foundation was not as good as the illusory sky divine pythons, and it was still trying to break through to the sage realm. For the time being, it could not help Yi Shiwen much. However, to Yi Shiwen, the star beast's potential was not small at all. This was because Yi Shiwen had given a portion of the beast ancestor's blood essence to it. When it completely transformed, it would become another powerful beast ancestor. Back then, although the beast ancestor had not achieved Tao, it could be said to be one of the strongest below the imperial emperors. Even the imperial emperors could not easily suppress it. With the existence of the contract between the beast ancestor and Yi Shiwen did not have to worry about the beast ancestor betraying him. The stronger the beast ancestor was, the more benefits Yi Shiwen would receive. Yi Shiwen used the time robe and grabbed 1/10 of the emperor's source. Then, he took a step and disappeared from the demon monarch's treasury. It was rare that he did not bring the Tianyuan mirror and the Avicii sword with him. They were both left in the demon monarch's treasury to transform and make breakthroughs. However, he still brought the time robe. With his current cultivation, coupled with the help of the time robe, he could go anywhere in the world. Naturally, he did not need to worry about anything. After Yi Shiwen disappeared, Yimo opened his eyes and looked in the direction where Yi Shiwen had disappeared. Then, he closed his eyes again and absorbed the energy of the emperor's source. He had already reached the point where he could not be distracted. As for Yi Shiwen, he did not care anymore. Unless the imperial emperors descended, there was nothing to worry about. Chapter 2762. It had been 3 years since the great defeat, but to the various realms, this matter had only just begun to ferment. 3 years was just a blink of an eye to those high and mighty figures. The ferment brought about by this matter, and the storm it stirred became stronger and stronger. The impact of this battle on the allied forces of the various races was imaginable. Everyone had suffered heavy losses. It was not just one faction that had suffered heavy losses. All the factions had suffered heavy losses. This was also the reason why they had used mixed legions at the beginning. This way, there would not be a situation where people did not put in the effort. There were experts from various races in each legion. Although the various factions had their own elite legions, most of the experts had been sent out. Now, they had suffered heavy losses. The upper echelons of the various factions were hopping mad. It was not just the lower-level experts who had suffered heavy losses. Even the upper echelons of the various factions had lost many god kings. Not only had many god kings from the heavenly race fallen, but many god kings from the allied forces of the various races had also fallen. More than half of them had died when they were defeated. In the beginning, they had the upper hand because of their strength. Their losses were much less than those of the heavenly race. However, it was completely different later on. The Darch Corpse Tao artifact continued to chase after them, causing the various races to suffer heavy losses. Even the upper echelons had suffered heavy casualties. Some king-conferring sects only had 1 or 2 king-conferring formidable martial artists. They had simply been removed from the ranks of king-conferring sects. Almost all the pillars of the sects had collapsed. Some had powerful enemies and did not have powerful king-conferring formidable martial artists to hold down the fort. They either sought protection from other king-conferring sects or hid their tails between their legs. Some even hid in mystic realms, closing their doors and not coming out. They did not care about what was happening outside. They had been forced to their limits. In addition, some sects that were related to the heavenly race had been uprooted. In these 3 years, there was not enough time for all sorts of reshuffling. All the factions had been cleansing and reshuffling. Before the battle started, everyone had already thought that they would suffer heavy losses. After all, this was a battle to exterminate the race. The heavenly race would definitely struggle with all their might and fight to the death. who knew that this fish was a shark. The net was not as strong as everyone had thought. It broke in an instant. This time, they had suffered heavy losses, but the Tion clan's losses had not reached the level that everyone had hoped for. They had retained their vitality, and this made everyone feel as if they could not endure it. Yi Shiwen wasn't very clear about this because he didn't go out even once in the past 3 years. When he went out, he found that the myriad heavens realms was still very chaotic. It was even more chaotic than he had expected. Chaos was everywhere. Yi Shiwen didn't stop and went straight to the Alliance headquarters. He found the Flame Lord and asked about the changes in the past 3 years. The Lord of Flames had more things to do than before. However, most of them were handled by his primordial spirit incarnation. Before Yi Shiwen arrived, the Lord of Flames had just come out of seclusion. He had finally broken through to the mid-stage king-ranked realm. In that battle, he had also been defeated. What's more, he had been targeted by one of the 10 great god kings of the heavenly race. He had almost not been able to escape. It was a tragic sight. However, to him, this battle was also a form of training that he had never experienced before. In just 3 short years, he had successfully broken through to the late-stage king-ranked realm. Among the same batch of people, if one didn't consider Yi Shiwen and the other demons, he was considered one of the fastest. Terrible. In these 3 years, I have been dealing with the later generations. I haven't heard much about the other clans. Our Hidden Valley has also lost a king-ranked martial artist. The Flame Lord said. This time, the losses in Hidden Valley were too great. One lineage was either going to merge with another lineage or be eliminated. Without a king-ranked martial artist to hold down the fort, nothing could be guaranteed. However, it was still much better than a king-ranked sect being eliminated. Yi Shiwen fell silent for a moment. He didn't bother with these things and left them all to the Flame Lord to handle. He was basically the hands-off boss. However, if it were him, he wouldn't be in the mood to deal with these things. What's more, he was at a crucial point in his cultivation. Naturally, he didn't want to bother with these things. Junior brother, you said that you were going into seclusion. Are you out of seclusion now? The Flame Lord looked at Yi Shiwen in surprise. Previously, when Yi Shiwen said that he was going into seclusion, the Flame Lord thought that it would take a long time. He didn't think that Yi Shiwen would be out so soon. The Flame Lord looked at Yi Shiwen again and realized that he couldn't tell how strong Yi Shiwen was. Initially, the Flame Lord could only vaguely tell that Yi Shiwen's strength was unfathomable. However, now, he didn't even feel that Yi Shiwen was unfathomable. Instead, he felt that Yi Shiwen was like a calm lake with no wind or waves. However, the Flame Lord knew that Yi Shiwen wasn't that simple. What's more, Yi Shiwen's real body had appeared. He must have improved. Originally, Yi Shiwen was already at the mid-stage king-ranked realm and could fight against the 10 great god kings. Now, didn't that mean that he was about to break through to the late-stage king-ranked realm? His true strength would improve by leaps and bounds. Originally, the Flame Lord thought that he would be able to catch up to Yi Shiwen's cultivation level. As for combat strength, he didn't have any extravagant hopes. What a joke! It was impossible for him to catch up to Yi Shiwen in terms of combat strength. Yi Shiwen was a monster. Who would have thought that he would be able to catch up to Yi Shiwen's cultivation level after coming out of seclusion? Who knew that he would fall behind Yi Shiwen again? The Flame Lord couldn't help but sigh again. A normal person couldn't be compared to a monster. However, the stronger Yi Shiwen was, the more advantageous it would be for the Hidden Valley, which had been severely injured. He was secretly happy in his heart. In the beginning, he still had the thought of competing with Yi Shiwen. But now, he had completely given up on such thoughts. They weren't on the same level at all. Now that D&I has not been killed, it will be even more difficult to kill him. Could he really be a big shot favored by the heavens and earth? Even such a huge army couldn't kill him. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly as he spoke. Isn't that so? The losses this time were too great. The Flame Lord couldn't help but frown at the thought of that scene. Yi Shiwen hadn't been involved in the aftermath and thus didn't know much about it. However, the Flame Lord understood it all too well. Yi Shiwen nodded. The sense of crisis in his heart was even heavier. He had to make another breakthrough before D&I attained Tao. He had to have the ability to protect himself. How are the higher-ups of the Alliance army doing now? Yi Shiwen asked. The Flame Lord raised his eyebrows and said, If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have almost forgotten. This matter is a little troublesome. How much do you know about that demon race's EMO? What happened to EMO? Yi Shiwen asked. Now the higher-ups want to investigate the root cause of this failure. Other than catching some of the spies that the Tian clan has hidden for a long time, we also want to find the person who sent the news. If I remember correctly, that person should be EMO, right? The Master of Flames asked with a frown. Yi Shiwen nodded. He still remembered this matter. It was said that EMO had passed the information to the place where DNI was hiding. At first, he thought that he had made a great contribution. However, it seemed that this wasn't the case. If this battle had gone smoothly, then he would have made a great contribution. However, not only did he fail, but he was also ambushed by the Sky Race. Now, EMO was also on the list of the higher-ups of the Alliance army. Many people even began to clamor that EMO was actually the biggest spy buried by the Sky Race. From the beginning, it was to trick them into falling into a trap. This argument was very popular. EMO himself didn't have any background. The only person who could be related to him was Yi Shiwen. It seemed that he was the weakest of the bunch. Moreover, the higher-ups of the various races were now extremely angry. He was the target that they needed to vent their anger on. Therefore, many people had already attributed this failure to EMO. Some people were a little more rational. However, they also felt that even if EMO wasn't a spy, this matter couldn't be separated from him. If it wasn't for the information that he passed, how could the Alliance army fall into such a big trap? It was reasonable for him to stand up and take responsibility. Recently, such cries were very loud. In particular, some extremely angry families of the victims even went to the higher-ups of the Alliance army and requested for a warrant to arrest EMO. After listening to the Flame Lord's narration, Yi Shiwen couldn't help but smile coldly. What a joke! Does the information that EMO passed mean that EMO is a spy? Yi Shiwen didn't even think about it. It wasn't because he was closer to EMO. It was because he knew about EMO's background. He knew that EMO couldn't do such a thing. Ordinary people didn't know, but Yi Shiwen knew that EMO was the Dao tool that the Demon King carried with him. If one were to talk about the noble status in this world, he was basically at the top. How could such a person be a spy for the Heavenly Clan? If this was the case, wouldn't it mean that the Demon King was a spy for the Heavenly Clan? This was simply impossible. Unrivaled experts who had cultivated to such a level. Which one of them wasn't a hero who had experienced countless trials and tribulations? How could they bow down at the feet of the Tian clan? If I remember correctly, after EMO passed the information, the Alliance army sent people to verify it. After the verification, they sent the army to surround it. Why does it sound like EMO deliberately led them into the encirclement? They also confirmed the location of the rebellious emperor, so they set up such a plan. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sneer and say, That's true, but the Flame Lord was worried. However, before he finished speaking, a loud rebuke came from outside. Where is that kid named Yi Shiwen? Chapter 2763. Where is that brat called Yi Shiwen? His voice traveled directly into the encampment of the Allied forces in the Hidden Valley. Even the matrix that had been set up long ago could not stop the sound waves from spreading. The entire hall was actually trembling slightly. There was no power contained in it. Just a loud roar was enough to shake the hall. It was extremely terrifying. The expressions of the two of them changed slightly. In another instant, the two of them had already flashed out of the hall. However, at this time, the sky was filled with golden light sprinkling in midair. Waves of tyrannical aura shot up into the sky. This is the Allied Forces law enforcement team. The Lord of Flame's expression changed all of a sudden. He uttered a name that terrified everyone in the Allied Forces. The Allied Forces law enforcement team was an organization that had an illustrious reputation in the Allied Forces. This was because the purpose of this organization was to enforce the law. They specialized in dealing with those who did not perform well in battle or traitors. After this defeat, They were the ones to find those who colluded with the Tian clan. Similarly, they were also the ones who personally eradicated them. Often, the entire clan would be annihilated. It could be said to be extremely cruel. Those who were selected were all experts among experts without exception. The weakest among them was an expert at the peak of the Sage realm. Even the squad leader was a divine king. It could be said that the allied forces were terror-stricken at the mere mention of it. Although there were not many of them, in terms of combat power, they were not much weaker than an army. Their army leader was even one of the 10 divine kings, the Lord of the Netherworld. This was also an extremely legendary king. He, who was born in the Netherworld race, was originally just an ordinary specter. Later on, he slowly slaughtered his way through and killed his way to the level of the 10 great divine kings. He was simply a model of a counterattack from the bottom. The Netherworld clan was somewhat similar to ghosts like resentful souls and zombies. However, they were completely different. This was because, be it resentful souls or zombies, they could not be naturally produced. Zombies were formed from experts who had died through a special transformation. Resentful souls were formed from the spirits of experts that did not dissipate. They did not have the ability to produce naturally. On the other hand, the Netherworld race was different. They existed in the form of specters, but in essence, they were normal creatures. They could produce offspring normally. This made them completely different from ordinary ghosts. They weren't of the same type. This clan had always been very mysterious. They were good at controlling ghosts to fight, and it was a very strange way of fighting. The Lord of the Underworld was an invincible figure who had truly reached the peak of this clan. He was also the first great expert to reach the level of the 10 great divine kings in the history of the Netherworld race. His prestige in the Netherworld race was so high that no one could compare to him. Yishuin took a closer look. Sure enough, a translucent figure was slowly, faintly discernible in the center of this army. It was a young man. His complexion was gloomy and cold. His body was exuding a terrifying aura. It seemed as if his aura had merged with the void. Lord of the Netherworld, what are you trying to do? The Lord of Flames spoke up with a terrible look on his face. Although the Alliance law enforcement team was infamous, it wasn't much of a deterrent to the higher-ups of the Alliance like him, who had never done anything shameful. As long as he didn't betray the Alliance law enforcement team wasn't qualified to touch him. Now, the Alliance law enforcement team had actually come to kill him. It was simply a slap in the face. Lord of Flames, this matter has nothing to do with you. Don't get involved. I'm here to look for Yishuin. The Lord of the Netherworld didn't look at the Lord of Flames. To him, the Lord of Flames wasn't a threat at all. The one who he truly felt was dangerous was Yishuin. Although Yishuin didn't attack at the moment, no one could forget how he fought against the Clear Moon King back then. You're here to look for me? Huh? I don't know what crime I've committed to make you the chief commander of the Alliance law enforcement team. Come personally? Yishuin sneered and said, If I don't come personally, will you listen to me obediently? The Lord of the Netherworld's voice was a little gloomy. At this moment, when he laughed, it made people feel even more gloomy. Are you sure that I'll listen to you obediently if you come personally? Yishuin said indifferently. His expression had already begun to show some displeasure. Who do you think you are? How dare you come and catch me? Yishuin, don't be arrogant anymore. Your crimes have already been exposed. The Lord of the Netherworld said sternly. If you surrender now, perhaps I'll let you live on account of your contributions. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You've made some contributions. Who do you think you were to say this? Where were you when the army went to war? If I hadn't fought with my life on the front line, not even half of the people would be able to return now. Yishuin laughed loudly. His eyes flickered with a hint of sharpness. His mind started to work quickly as he analyzed these matters. Moreover, I really don't understand what crime I've committed. What crime? I think you should be very clear about it. This time, it was Yemo who sent false information that caused the Allied forces to suffer a great loss. The civilians will not be appeased if they don't kill him. You have a deep relationship with him. so we've decided to investigate you properly. If you really have a relationship with him and are related to the heavenly clan, then don't blame us," said the Lord of the Netherworld loudly. At this moment, the movement of the Allied Forces law enforcement team had already attracted the attention of many people. Originally, everyone was a little puzzled as to why the law enforcement team would come with such great fanfare. Generally speaking, even a divine king would not be able to escape punishment if a small team was dispatched. Not to mention, the chief captain was personally dispatched. Among the forces that had been dealt with in the past 3 years, there were not many cases where the Lord of the Netherworld had personally taken action. However, when they saw Yi Shiwen, they instantly understood. Yi Shiwen's ferocious prestige still remained in their hearts. He was able to fight and defeat Pure Moon King. If the target of the pursuit was him, then it was understandable that the Lord of the Netherworld had personally taken action. If they are chasing after Yi Shiwen, then could it be because of that Yimo's matter? Indeed, it can only be because of Yimo. I saw with my own eyes that Yi Shiwen fought against the Heavenly Clan's Dao instrument and saved countless people. If it wasn't because of Yimo, I'm afraid the law enforcement team wouldn't have the guts to take action against him. Many people came to a sudden realization and suddenly thought of many things. They were not stupid. They could think of many things through a little bit of clues. What a joke. Do you think the accusation is groundless? If you have evidence, you can take it out. If you don't, you'd better retreat as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will lose face in front of your subordinates. It will be difficult to lead the team, and don't blame me for not reminding you then," said Yi Shiwen coldly. It would be fine if there was evidence, but there was none at all. If they only wanted to scare him, then they were thinking too much and making a big mistake. Of course, Yi Shiwen would not be scared. "Now, we are asking you to assist in the investigation. As for evidence, you will have it when the time comes," said the Lord of the Netherworld coldly. Yi Shiwen did not give him face, which made him even more annoyed. Ever since he became the chief captain of the law enforcement team, many divine kings had been frightened by his name. Yi Shiwen was not the only one. "If you don't have evidence, then please forgive me for not helping," said Yi Shiwen, not giving him face at all. The Lord of the Netherworld immediately shouted, "Yi Shiwen, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. When the time comes, you can't blame me if I don't have any strength." "Ha ha ha, I want to see how you don't have any strength. You are really bold. You actually dare to arrest me with groundless accusations. Do you really think I am a soft persimmon that can be bullied? I also want to see how powerful you are when you don't have any strength. You are also one of the 10 great divine kings. How much stronger are you compared to the Pure Moon King?" Yi Shiwen laughed loudly without fear. "Who gave you such courage and confidence to think that you can take me down by yourself? Where is the immortal Copper King? Didn't you come? The number one of the 10 great divine kings. This title has been held for tens of thousands of years. I also want to see how good it is," said Yi Shiwen as he looked around. Everyone was in an uproar. In the eyes of many people, Yi Shiwen's words were simply arrogant. Although Yi Shiwen had defeated the Pure Moon King before, the position of the Pure Moon King and the immortal Copper King in everyone's hearts was completely different. The Pure Moon King's ranking among the 10 great divine kings could only be considered to be at the bottom. He wasn't the most outstanding one. On the other hand, the immortal Copper King was the number one of the 10 great divine kings. Many people faintly guessed that the number one person in this realm should not be stronger than him. Being able to defeat the Pure Moon King didn't mean that he could challenge the immortal Copper King. "How dare you?" shouted the Lord of the Netherworld. "It seems that you really won't shed a tear until you fall into the coffin. Is the immortal Copper King someone that you can slander? I think you are really related to the Tian clan. Maybe you are a spy for the remnants of the Tian clan," said the Lord of the Netherworld with a cold smile. "See how I take you down first. Don't think that defeating the Pure Moon King is something great. He is only at the bottom. I can be ranked in the top 5 of the 10 great divine kings." Boom! The Lord of the Underworld's body emitted waves of light that resembled the Yellow Springs. It was as brilliant as the Milky Way. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a netherworld hell. Countless ghosts crawled out of it. The night walk of 10,000 ghosts could be heard everywhere. The cries of ghosts did not sound like the voices of living creatures. It was extremely terrifying. Take it from me. The Lord of the Netherworld moved instantly. Countless laws scattered in all directions in an instant. Circle after circle of ripples spread out. It was unknown when his figure had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's reaction wasn't slow at all. He blasted out a punch and directly blasted into the Lord of the Netherworld's body. However, his entire arm passed through. Chapter 2764. Yi Shiwen's fist passed through the Lord of the Netherworld's body directly. It seemed as if it had penetrated the void and did not hit anything at all. He immediately realized that this was the characteristic of the Netherworld clan. At crucial moments, they could turn illusory and turn themselves into an afterimage. This was a bit similar to the ability of the Divine Master. They seemed to be standing in place, but in fact, their real bodies were countless spaces away, making it impossible for others to attack them. However, the Netherworld clan's ability was even stranger. It was an innate magical power. They could freely switch between illusory and physical, let alone the Lord of the Netherworld, who was the strongest expert in the history of the Netherworld clan. The Lord of the Netherworld did not care at all. He only sneered and opened his bloody mouth to swallow Yi Shiwen. He wanted to bite Yi Shiwen to death. Illusory and physical. The corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth curled up into a sneer. Just as the Lord of the Netherworld was about to open his bloody mouth and swallow him whole, he heard a clanging sound. The Lord of the Netherworld suddenly screamed, and his entire body instantly exploded. He turned into a cloud of blood mist and reassembled in the distance. Just as he was about to devour Yi Shiwen, he materialized, and Yi Shiwen seized this opportunity. This was an opportunity that ordinary people would never be able to seize. This was because they didn't know when the Lord of the Netherworld would materialize. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He didn't need to know when the Lord of the Netherworld would materialize. All he had to do was attack faster than the Lord of the Netherworld. This was the extreme speed that he had cultivated the space wings to the peak. He did not have to worry at all. To others, the most terrifying thing about the Lord of the Netherworld was that he could switch between illusory and physical. He was not a threat to Yi Shiwen at all. If he was only illusory, he could not pose a threat to Yi Shiwen. If he dared to materialize, he would die. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had never taken his threat seriously. The Lord of the Netherworld's greatest reliance was not worth mentioning to Yi Shiwen. Perhaps, the Lord of the Netherworld's threat was not as realistic as King Pure Moon's. The Lord of the Netherworld retreated into the distance. His expression was a little cold and ugly. He hadn't expected that his all-out attack would be so weak against Yi Shiwen. This was undoubtedly the biggest blow to him. At this time, the various outstanding heroes who were paying attention to this place were slightly silent. Everyone's gazes were fixated on this place. Among them, many had either competed with the Lord of the Netherworld or Yi Shiwen for supremacy. This was another pinnacle battle. That's all you've got, Yi Shiwen said coldly. He had some killing intent towards this person who wanted to capture him as soon as he arrived. Humph, Yi Shiwen, don't be too rampant, the Lord of the Underworld said coldly. Above his head, a pitch-black bottle floated up and down. Millions of rules fell down, as if it was covered by a layer of feathers. His aura instantly became sharp and tyrannical. His aura had completely changed. He was, after all, an expert ranked among the 10 great divine kings too. For so many years, he was also considered to have fought countless battles. A momentary setback could not make him waver in the slightest. Boom! The bottle above his head suddenly toppled down. Endless underworld spring water poured down and quickly turned into an ocean of underworld spring water. Underworld spring water. It's really underworld spring water, someone exclaimed. In that case, this is the superb divine artifact that made the Lord of the Netherworld famous, the Netherworld Aquarius. Over the years, very few people have been able to directly see him use the Netherworld Aquarius. This move is indeed extraordinary. Many people recalled various legends about the Lord of the Netherworld. The Lord of the Netherworld could really create a Netherworld hell. His divine kingdom was such a place. In his divine kingdom of the Netherworld, underworld spring water flowed all year round. It came from the sky and flowed into the endless future. As soon as the underworld spring water appeared, it instantly corroded everything in the world. Even the void was corroded. The power of the underworld spring water was naturally needless to say. Those who had crossed the divine tribulation also understood how terrifying it was. There were many people present who had crossed the divine tribulation by luck. Now, when they saw the underworld spring water, they only felt their legs tremble. They were simply scared to death. The origin of the underworld spring water was mysterious. Other than when crossing the heavens tribulation, it had only appeared mysteriously in some relics. Ordinary gods would also lose their divinity when they soaked in the underworld spring water. They would degenerate into mortals. If they continued to soak in the underworld spring water, even gods would also die. It was also because of this that the underworld spring water was a kind of terrifying legend for everyone. Since ancient times, there were many people who tried to use the underworld spring water for their own use. However, only a few people succeeded. Do you want to create a battlefield that belongs to you? Unfortunately, it's a little too late. Yi Shiwen sneered and blasted out a punch. With just one punch, the sky instantly cracked. Countless arrays were resurrected one after another. They were activated by this terrifying fist energy and automatically activated their defense. Just this punch actually blocked the spread of the underworld spring water. As for Yi Shiwen, he directly stretched his body into the underworld spring water without the slightest hesitation. To everyone, the underworld spring water was nothing at all. This was because he had also collected some of this underworld spring water himself. His understanding of this underworld spring water was too deep. However, for the Lord of the Underworld, this was just the beginning. Endless underworld spring water seemed to be absorbed by a terrifying force. It flew up and lingered around him. It made him look like the Lord of Hell, controlling the underworld spring water and conquering the world. There was a bit of anger in his expression. His fist smashed down with a shocking momentum. Boom! Everyone's expression changed slightly. This was too terrifying. Although some people had secretly collected some underworld spring water, to be able to use the underworld spring water to this extent, the Lord of the Underworld was indeed considered to be unprecedented. No one knew where this underworld spring water came from. It was simply the nemesis of all things in the world. It brought all things in the world into death and silence. However, in the face of this attack, Yi Shiwen's face showed no fear. He directly received it with both his palms. Humph, he's really courting death. He actually dared to use his hands to receive the underworld spring water. Even if his physical body is at the level of a divine tool, it will completely lose its brilliance under the underworld spring water. It will be completely useless. Many members of the law enforcement team revealed a somewhat disdainful expression. In their opinion, of course, the Lord of the Underworld was the most powerful. They were originally the elites among the elites, the experts among the experts. Naturally, they had their eyes on the top. Even Yi Shiwen, who had long become famous in the heavens, could not make them waver. Bang! There was a loud roar. Yi Shiwen's hands directly received the attack of the Lord of the Underworld. Originally, everyone had high hopes that the underworld spring water would be able to severely injure Yi Shiwen. However, it did not play its role at all. It could not even corrode the surface of Yi Shiwen's body, let alone severely injure Yi Shiwen. How is this possible? Everyone was dumbfounded. They were completely in disbelief. If they were in Yi Shiwen's shoes, even their bones would have been melted. This was not ordinary underworld spring water. It was also under the control of the Lord of the Underworld. The reason why the Lord of the Underworld's ranking was so high was partly because of his racial talent, and partly because of the underworld spring water. When used together, it was simply impossible to guard against. He could make the underworld spring water appear anywhere, and it could even become illusory. Any opponent would have a headache when faced with it. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He was not afraid of the underworld's spring water at all. Therefore, the Lord of the Underworld was already more than half crippled. Many of his abilities could not be used. However, they obviously did not know that Yi Shiwen had even done something as crazy as soaking in the underworld spring water and refining his body with the underworld spring water. The underworld spring water, which made others pale at the mention of it, was nothing to him. Whoosh! While everyone was still in a state of shock, Yi Shiwen made his move. He launched a counterattack, and a terrifying power instantly overflowed in all directions. The vault of the sky instantly shattered like glass. He had already rushed directly in front of the Lord of the Underworld. "Be careful!" Everyone cried out in alarm. At this moment, everyone had already broken free from the shock of the Lord of the Underworld's spring water. They were all worried for him. The strength of the Lord of the Netherworld was naturally extremely strong. He reacted in an instant and virtualized instantly. Yi Shiwen's attack passed through his body. It was as if the scene of their first fight had reappeared in his mind. Illusory? Is it useful? Yi Shiwen sneered. His entire body was instantly entangled with endless space laws. In an instant, they turned into chains and locked the surrounding space. The Lord of the Underworld retreated frantically. He was extremely fast. He was almost pinned down by Yi Shiwen. Although his body had become illusory, this also required a medium. It was impossible for him to exist independently from space. Therefore, space and time were the two basic laws that constituted the universe. Time and space formed the universe. If one was afraid of the fire laws, they could survive in places where there were no fire laws. They could even eliminate the fire laws. However, no one could eliminate the time and space laws. They definitely existed. Therefore, warriors who had a certain level of attainment in these two aspects had already surpassed the level that ordinary people could understand. They were in an invincible position. He was almost locked down by Yi Shiwen. This caused the Lord of the Underworld's expression to turn extremely ugly. His Sherwin treasure could not gain any advantage in front of Yi Shiwen. At this moment, Yi Shiwen's figure had already appeared in front of the Lord of the Underworld. He blasted another attack. It was just an ordinary attack. However, with the help of his super terrifying power, it erupted with astonishing power. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.